yesterday. I made mention of it. But I want to circle back to it today. I realize now that, and there is a reason from the NFL standpoint why I'm going where I'm about to go. But I realize now that schools work on like a year-long calendar. For example, Jimmy Cook, when you were in high school, you're the pride of Ron Colley, correct?
Indeed. Go Royals.
When you were in high school, were they the Royals when you were in high school?
They were not.
Okay. So does that make you feel conflicted when you watch the Royals against your Yankees?
No, it does not.
Okay. When you were in high school, how long was your fall break?
A couple days.
Like a Thursday, Friday, right?
Yeah.
Eddie Garrison, you're the pride of Decatur Central High School, right?
Yes, I am.
That make you feel
Go
conflicted
Hawks.
last night
There it
when you
is.
watched the Hawks taking on the Pacers?
Nope, not at all. Not one bit.
Because it was preseason?
That's
That's
right. When you were, Eddie, in high school, how long was your fall break?
So it changed, I think, once. It used to be a week, then it went to a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Thursday, Friday, one of the two.
But it started as a week,
Yes.
and then it got shorter.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Because they extended spring break to 2 weeks
Really?
and shortened summer by a week.
Okay.
I wouldn't take that trade.
So
That's another show, but I wouldn't do that.
I recall fall break when I was in high school. The one thing that I remember is going with my parents to go visit the University of Alabama for a school visit and listening to the B-52s on a Discman on the drive down. My mom really liked the song Rome. I remember that. But what I remember was I think it was a Friday off. It might have been Thursday, Friday, but I think it was just Friday off. And now, all of a sudden, and I know this because of, my niece, for example, right now is doing college visit. Now they get a month off for fall break. Schools they take the whole month of October off and then part of November. It's incredible.
Yeah, my nephews are in Gulf Shores right now, just chilling for a week.
Yeah,
Like,
it's amazing,
nice.
right? The reason I bring it up is because it feels like Gulf Shores, by the way, that's not going to be in the path, is it?
Don't believe so, no.
Okay.
No, I'm pretty sure they're
That's
good.
where everybody's going towards, right, to get up and away.
Yep.
But it feels like for the Indianapolis Colts, this is fall break, fall recess. Because in most weeks, the storyline is about what are they going to do against, how are they going to slow down T.J. Watt in Pittsburgh? That was a big, that was a big storyline. What are they going to do in trying to snap the skid in Jacksonville? What exactly is going to happen? How good is Caleb Williams going to be? And are the Bears going to be able to move the football? Each week we talk about what the storyline is for the Colts in terms of the opponent that week. And now here they are getting set for the Tennessee Titans. And all of the conversation is about just the Colts roster in general. And we hardly even talk about who the opponent is. Partially because there are injury storylines to watch for the Colts, and we'll get you to that in a second. But also because Tennessee just does not feel, for a team that has been, for the better part of the first half of the AFC South tenure and for the better years of the Colts, they've been a pretty consistently good, competitive, tough nails team. And now they've got a quarterback in Will Levis who leads and is tied for the league, I should say, in the AFC in interceptions with Anthony Richardson. But they've got their own issues where it just feels like, what exactly are the Titans doing? They spend a lot of money, but they have a quarterback. Is it really the guy? Nobody knows. And it just seems like that there's a danger here because it's on the road and you don't get caught up in who it is they're taking on, but rather what it is internally they're having to deal with. And yet we're going to talk today to Paul Kuharsk down there in Nashville about the Titans. But, Jimmy, it just feels like in the grand scheme of things, when you look at the schedule for the Colts, this is the opponent that we focus the least on. Be that right or wrong. Am I wrong here?
No, you're not. They're a punchline. They've been a punchline ever since they had the entire reshaping of their offseason this year and getting rid of Mike Vrabel and selling that they were going to be a stronger, more consistent team because of that. You could argue they've been a punchline since they decided to roll the dice and take Will Levis and trot him out there like he's going to be this franchise-saving quarterback. They're not a good football team. But that said, I am a big believer in signature moment games or circling games on the schedule. And if you are a Will Levis believer, which I don't think anybody in this room is, but if you are, you look at a game like this against a Colts defense that's reeling, and you're up against a quarterback that many think is far superior to you, and it's an opportunity for a statement game. That combined with the fact that they still do have decent weapons in their receiver room, and they go by committee with how they attack the running back game, and it's a decent attack. But they're not a serious football team. They're a football team that's going to in all likelihood be shopping things at the deadline. You see DeAndre Hopkins in a trade rumor every other day, but those two things, the Will Levis paradox of it, where he's sitting here in a moment of potentially a signature game in division against a quarterback that was drafted in your same class, combined with the Swiss cheese-like maneuvering of the Colts defense.
I like Swiss cheese. Do you like Swiss cheese?
I do like Swiss cheese.
What's your favorite kind of cheese?
Havarti cheese.
Excuse me?
Havarti cheese.
Eddie, are you familiar with Havarti cheese?
Nope.
It's delicious.
Can you explain further what Havarti cheese is?
It's like
is it cheese from the Havarti region?
No, I was going to say it's the chai tea of the cheeses.
It very well might be the chai tea. I would argue Gouda might be the chai tea.
Can you explain what a Havarti cheese is?
So it's like a white.
Gouda you can at least get in most places.
You can get Havarti at any grocery store. It's not like a fancy
no, like restaurants.
Yeah, sure. There's a brew burger, Burn Burger, I believe, has Havarti cheese on it. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. No, it's a creamy cheese.
It is a semi-soft Danish cow's milk cheese. It has a creamy texture with small irregular holes.
It has to be from Danish cows?
And buttery, slightly
Hold on.
tangy
Does this mean
flavor.
cows that are... Now, Danish is Denmark, right? Dutch is Amsterdam, and Danish is Denmark. Am I correct in that? I think that's right. So
Yes.
these are cows from Denmark. Does that mean that they bring them over here and they're of Danish descent, or that the milk has to come from Denmark? Because the spoil factor there seems like it'd be high. Is Havarti an expensive cheese?
No, you can get it in the same aisle that you can your cheddar cheese and American cheese.
Then that's got to be knockoff stuff, because you would think it's got to be outrageously expensive to fly the cows over here from Denmark.
I don't know how to say the brand of cheese that I've seen this packaging though.
Havarti's the brand or the style?
Sargento is the brand.
Sargento, yeah, that's right.
So they sell Havarti cheese as well.
Well, Sargento's based out of Wisconsin, right? That's America's Dairyland. And at the Road America, again, America, they have the Sargento Bridge. So I'm surprised that Sargento's getting involved with the Dane folks.
This will help you. It inhabits
sort of a middle.
It inhabits sort of a middle ground between Munster cheese, Monterey cheddar
Munster
jack,
cheese is out of Munster, right up there near Chicago.
Cheese.
That's also in the United States.
Trying to give you 3 cheese flavors.
What was the second one you mentioned there?
Monterey Jack, and then butter cheese.
Monterey's out of Monterey, California. Again, American.
And then butter cheese.
Butter cheese?
It's a middle ground between those.
Okay.
I love it. It's my favorite cheese, hands down.
I think they're selling you a can of goods here on this Harventi being Danish.
We used to have like little Sunday snacks when I was a kid. We'd go apples, a collection of crackers, and then different cheeses, and Havarti was always my favorite.
Eddie.
Loved it.
Eddie, when you were growing up in Decatur Township, did snack often revolve around cheese flights?
Nope.
Did my mom spoil me? Yes. She did.
Okay.
So anyway, Havarti, what about you?
You said cheeses.
Is Swiss your favorite?
Swiss, yeah.
And Eddie?
American.
All right, there you go. Nice.
Well, I'm not picky. I'm not picky though. American, Swiss, provolone, Colby Jack.
Say that with your chest.
What about the Velveeta? Is that real cheese or is that like Havarti?
Liquid gold.
Let me guess. Is Velveeta? Are we going to look at it? Is Velveeta like
Havarti is real
comes
cheese.
from Austrian cows
or
something?
I thought Velveeta was a brand.
I think it is. I think it's like a knockoff cheese, right? Isn't Velveeta to cheese what Miracle Whip is to mayonnaise? Anyway, speaking of mayonnaise, back to Will Levis.
Yes.
As you were.
Anyway, this is a statement opportunity game for him. That combined with the Swiss cheese element of the Colts defense, which is what took us down that cheese hole, no pun intended, is where I am worried. And I think there should be proper respect given to the Tennessee Titans in that regard. Maybe offensively. Defensively, not so much. But from an offensive standpoint, this just feels like one of those where if I'm Will Levis or if I'm a Titans fan, I'm licking my lips at the opportunity to play this Colts defense.
Hey, Jake, Fair Oaks Dairy in northern Indiana makes an award-winning Havarti. It is excellent. Now, here's my question, though. Can you read for me again, Eddie, please, the description of Havarti cheese?
Let me pull it back up.
I'm a little confused by this.
Okay. Havarti cheese is a rinless, smooth, and slightly bright surfaced with a cream to yellow color depending on the type. Now it is a
But what's the definition
it's from a
you read
Danish
before
cow's milk.
There you go.
That's the key part.
It's a Gouda's Dutch milk.
Okay, so wait a minute. So are the Fair Oaks dairy folk up there in northern Indiana, are they shipping in cows from Denmark?
Yes.
Because if it's their award-winning Havarti cheese, it's got to be from Danish cows. Are they bringing them over from Copenhagen? Is that what they're doing?
It's all logistics, Jake.
You buy enough dip from Copenhagen and you get a cow that comes with it. Is that what happens here? Do we know?
They trade cheese curds for Danish cows.
I'm not calling out the Fair Oaks folks because they seem nice, and Mark Dykton takes family vacations there, so I know that it's a decent place. But if the Havarti stuff is supposed to be from Danish cows, but yet
are we saying it's exclusively from Danish cows, or are we saying that it was originating
I'm just going off Eddie's definition.
Denmark?
It is a semi-soft Danish cow's milk cheese.
Well, it's delicious. That's all you need to know. Add that in there. It's delightful.
Why has it got to be from the Danish cow, though?
Because it's where it was originated, I guess. That's all they had to go with.
More holistic.
Last night in Major League Baseball, I'm assuming that you guys watched, there were, you could not go, I don't know if you saw this, but if you were driving on 465, they had, usually they have the things that will come on that say traffic accident, mile 18, backup expected, or Amber Alerts, that kind of thing. This time it was Shohei Ohtani is 4 batters away from batting. Like anywhere you turn, people were telling you.
Have you seen that memed?
Yes.
It's been put in other places now, like on the Weather Channel. They'll put 22 hours.
But last night, he comes up. I mean, it's not often that we talk about baseball here, but for what it's worth, I mean, it is kind of exciting because this is a generational level player, and the Dodgers have spent so much money, and yet the Padres, that's a rivalry in itself. But Ohtani coming up to start the 9th, and they only need a run, right? And a guy that has been so good for so long. Credit the Padres. They got aggressive, went out and got themselves a bullpen, and here they are, a game away from eliminating an arch rival, but now the knockout blow is going to be the hardest one to land, right? Just like it's, for example, tonight when Kansas City, is it tonight when Kansas City takes the 2-1 lead over the Yankees?
It is tonight that the Yankees and the Royals play. That is true. Game 3.
Where's
TBS,
that game?
At Kauffman
Kansas City.
Yep.
Is that why you're wearing the road uniform today?
Indeed, yes.
Okay.
It's always a theme, Jake.
Oh, I've figured this out, yes. But how about the Phillies, though? In our beer bet on baseball, I have the Phillies and the Tigers. Those are my 2 remaining last hopes. And I kind of am rooting for the Mets. Even though I have the Phillies in our beer bet,
Sure.
I'm kind of rooting for the Mets, right?
I mean, they feel like when can you apply team of destiny label to a team that's hot in the playoffs? Does it have to be to get to the CS? Are they not clear of that hurdle yet? I was talking about a buddy of mine, big baseball fan, about this yesterday.
You weren't talking to me.
And I'd have another friend that's a big baseball fan, believe it or not. Shout out Nick Kuntz. But when do you get the label? Because it certainly feels like it. The hot streak they're on to go from wild card to a doorstep away from the championship series.
You've got to get within an elimination game of the CS before you can have that conversation.
Okay. All right.
But it's still cool.
Yeah.
I mean, baseball's just so fluky. That's what's great about the baseball playoffs, right?
Yes.
It's just fluky. But I think it's cool that, the Phillies, the interesting thing about the Phillies is they have been consistently the best team really over the course of the year, right? They're the one team that never really, I don't follow them intimately, but it doesn't seem like they went into any sort of a major slide over the course of the year. And yet, here they are now, a game away, right?
Eddie,
from ousted.
Can you explain one thing to me as the baseball aficionado of the show?
Yes, sir.
If you were the Dodgers, and you spent all that money, well, we talked about the deferral payments and all the jokes there, but if you spent all that money and you're going bullpen game tomorrow, how upset would you be if you're a Dodgers fan, or is this just a smart play on their part?
I think it's just the reality of where they're at with their health of their starting pitching. I mean, Walker Buehler hasn't been good. You saw that last night. Clayton Kershaw's hurt. He can't pitch, and they've had other injuries. Tyler Glasnow, he's also hurt. He's not on their roster, so there's 2 starters and then another starter who's not performing well. And when you've just got injuries, that's what you got to do. And that's what they've done pretty much the last month of the season. They have 3 starters. They roll with those 3, and then typically it's a bullpen game for game 4, whatever series or whatever the rotation is.
Over the course of the day today, we are going to monitor, by the way, and we will sprinkle in a little baseball chat, notably how it affects our beer bet. But we're going to monitor what the Colts are doing in terms of who's on the practice field and who's not. As a matter of fact, we will tell you just about 20 minutes from now the latest as it's happening on 56th Street of who is going and who's not. There are those players that we've been watching. Anthony Richardson is obviously the one from a health standpoint that we are going to keep track of on what he's doing this week, because I thought last week, Jimmy, truth be told, Richardson was trending towards the direct. It looked like he was going to be able to play on Sunday, and then it was late in the week when they decided to go ahead and scale it back, and you could get an indication based on the work that Flacco was doing on Friday that Joe Flacco was going to be the guy. But we will monitor that over the course of this week. I would expect that we will see Anthony Richardson on the field in Nashville, but then again, no guarantee. Today will be the first chance that we have to kind of see where things are trending. But this is a team that there are, when it comes to bye weeks, and I flippantly led the show by saying this is a bye week. It is not, obviously. But there are two schools of thought. One is that you want your bye week to come late in the year because that gives you a chance to get healthy for your final push.
Yeah.
The other is that maybe it's – I can't believe there are already teams that are going through the bye, right?
Yes.
But is it more advantageous to say – like if you could almost take the bye week, if you could select when you do it during the course of the year, are you better off saying, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and wait till the end to get that time to rest and relax and reset for the final push? Or does it need to come when you are at your most injured? Because the reality is that the Colts right now are pretty banged up. I mean, your quarterback, your running back, you've already lost one corner. You have a nickel that's out. Your defensive end is on IR, set to come back pretty soon, but still, you have another pass rusher that, missed time. You have, obviously, now on the offensive line, one guy that goes on to IR. They already have been hit pretty hard by the injury bug. And usually there's the narrative that the Colts are the most, gosh, it seems like they're just constantly injured, and what's going on, and is it the turf and everything else? I don't think it's that. I don't think that this year they have been more stricken than most franchises probably at this point. But nonetheless, it certainly does seem like, even though it's not the case, if there was a week that you would say, you know what, let's go ahead, if we were able to do it and take the bye, they're pretty banged up right now, truth be told. And getting healthy is going to be a big part of it, but it's a divisional game. And again, I don't want to say it's a trap game, but it kind of feels that way, right?
Well, I mean, the next two could be defined that way. They're not as much trap game labeled for me as they are must-wins. We've talked about, and there's varying views at that, I think, of all three of us, but we've talked about what expectations are for the Colts this season. I've made it pretty clear, Jake, as a view that it doesn't really matter to me where this season goes for them, as long as they get clear answers on Anthony Richardson for the foreseeable future, and he's able to put together a healthy campaign. We're already lost one game to that. Hopefully it's not two, but that's been my biggest concern. But if you're a Colts fan that is still mapping out hopes and dreams for the playoffs, these next two, Tennessee and Miami, I don't want to say fully decide your season because the AFC is such a mess right now. But if you drop to Miami and Tennessee and you face that gauntlet upcoming that still includes the likes of Houston and Buffalo and Detroit and the Jets, your season's cooked. So I don't know if it's much as a trap game as much as it is a game that you really, really have to have. And in regards to the bye week, you're right. This is unique for the Colts because of how injured they are right now. You can't really prepare for that going into the season, assuming, you're going to be as banged up as you are as early as they have been. Generally, for me, I like week 12 or later if you're mapping out that bye week for what you mentioned, because you're making that final push to the postseason and you're getting that last bit of rest.
Here's the thing. If you look at the Colts schedule, they've got a real tough gauntlet coming up here.
It's nuts.
Miami, they're getting a huge break just because of the Miami's been decimated also. But then the stretch you go on at Houston, at Minnesota, Bills here, at the Jets, who knows what they're going to be, Lions. And then you go to New England that I don't think is going to be very good, but they've made a quarterbacking change. We'll see what happens there. You go to Denver, which, Denver is very...
They got a really good defense.
They could be trickier than you originally thought. What happens then, though, and the Denver game's coming off the bye, a year ago, the Colts found themselves in position where we didn't think that they were going to be in contention for the division. And then all of a sudden, everything, teams started losing around them, and you're like, wait a minute. They're kind of holding serve here to the point where they are going into the finale of the regular season with a chance to win the division. And I'm not saying that that's going to be the case this year, because I think Houston is pretty good and already has, obviously, a clear advantage, and Indianapolis has stubbed their toe in the fact that they have already lost twice within the division. You lose to Tennessee, and you now go 0-3 within the division. You're in a world of hurt. But they do have, in terms of their schedule, theoretically a favorable one to finish out.
There's a light at the end of the tunnel after that
because
gauntlet.
Denver's tricky, but then Tennessee at home, at the Giants, and Jacksonville at home. I mean, those are 4 games that if you are healthy coming off the bye, and if you've got a little momentum, maybe if they've beaten New England, and I know that we're putting the cart way before the horse, and you never know what's going to happen, but
those are 3 teams that should have packed it in by now to end the season.
And what you learned a year ago is that you just don't know until you get there. You just don't know. It's so easy to look at it and say, look, this year's a wash. But if they can just kind of hang around, and in that gauntlet, if they can go maybe a game over 500 of those games, they've got a pretty good chance just based on the way the schedule plays out for them. But it is going to be very, very difficult for them if they go down to Nashville and end up just riding around on one of those school buses that has no top on it now, with a bunch of like bachelor and bachelorette parties and stopping in to Kid Rock's bar and whatever else and get caught up in the Nashville life, right? Have you done Broadway, Jimmy?
Yes, not prime heart of the evening, but I have. Yes, I've gone on a bar
Eddie,
crawl
you've done
there.
it, right?
Yeah.
No.
It's not as big as like a stretch as you would think. It's not like the Vegas Strip,
Right.
but it's pretty fun.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But the big question mark is, if you're going to Nashville and you're going to go on Broadway and you're going to withstand all of the bachelorette parties and everything else that's going on down there and then go to the game, which Colts are you going to be seeing in the game, and which Colts might actually be on Broadway watching it on the big screen because they're not playing in the game? We will try to pinpoint that in just about 5 minutes from now, telling you who is in and who is out for practice this week. We will do that on the other side. Big show lined up today. As I mentioned, Paul Kuharsk going to join us. Also, we have Kristen Airy coming up at the top of the hour talking about the Pacers from last night. Dave Revsine and Casey Vallier all going to join us as well. So a big show lined up. Want to remind you also, now through the end of the year, anyone who belongs to a monthly car wash program can save $20 off a signature service oil change and get a free tire rotation at Jiffy Lube. Go to the Pendleton Pike one, by the way. If you go there and you see Glenn, tell him I said what's up. Great dude, and they take care of your car. Go in there, and if you have a monthly car wash program, simply point to the sticker, and the Jiffy Lube staff there, the team members, will do the rest. Big savings from your trusted one-stop shop for all your vehicle maintenance, where you never need an appointment, talking about Jiffy Lube. Because if you care that much about the outside of your car, make sure that Jiffy Lube is there to take care of the inside as well. All right, inside and outside. Who's in, who's out for practice today for the Colts? We'll tell you next. Colts in Nashville taking on the Tennessee Titans on Sunday. Back on the practice field today over at West 56th. And here's how we're going to do this. Eddie Garrison, you have been keeping your ear to the ground. You're like in Stand By Me. Have I ever told you, have you seen the movie Stand By Me, Eddie?
I don't know.
Jimmy, have you seen Stand By Me?
I have. It's been a minute, but yes.
Eddie, you remind me of Vern.
Okay.
You're Vern from Stand By Me.
Okay.
And when they are crossing the train trestle, Vern at one point is going down to feel the railing, and Gordy also does the same thing, and that's when Vern loses his comb. But I'm going to ask you to feel the railing or get your ear to the ground by letting me know from your scouring and interacting with folks today now that practice is underway. I'm going to name the player for the Colts, and I want you to tell me via your creative signaling over there whether the player is practicing or not practicing today. Obviously, a practice would be the ding of approval. Not practicing would be the buzz of a decline. Okay? If you do not know yet, if that information is not yet available, what do we play for the not yet available? Do we have the...
I've got a sound for that.
Okay. All right. So we'll begin with center Ryan Kelly, who has a neck injury. Center Ryan Kelly. Okay. That's good news, right? Running back Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor, the running back who I can't... In matter of fact, I just momentarily lapsed. What is the injury for Jonathan Taylor? That's an ankle injury, correct?
Yes,
so,
sir.
right?
Yes,
okay,
sir.
Jonathan Taylor? He is not practicing, okay? Quarterback Anthony Richardson that has an oblique injury that has also been listed as a hip injury. Anthony Richardson. Oh, okay. That's good news. Nickelback Kenny Moore. And I forget exactly what Kenny Moore's injury is.
Hip.
Hip injury for Kenny Moore, on whether or not he's on the practice field.
Nice.
So we do not know for Kenny Moore yet, correct?
Correct.
Okay. We'll also go with pass rush specialist, at least thought to be, and defensive lineman Kwity Paye. Kwity Paye. Ooh. No eyes on Kwity Paye yet today?
They don't go onto the field until 1 o'clock, I believe. Shane Steichen only said the three that I gave you an answer on would or not be. So Richardson will practice, Kelly will practice, and Taylor will not practice. Steichen did not comment on how involved Richardson would be. Remember on Friday, Kevin Bowen hinted at during our conversation that Richardson really didn't do much last week. He was probably as limited could be. Pretty much just went through.
He said he wasn't going to practice at all, and then he went out, right?
Right. He just went. My guess when Richardson said that, he didn't count the individual drills as practice. He just counted that as like drill work,
Sure.
and practice for him was 7-on-7 or 11-on-11, and he did not participate.
No
in
first
either one
team
of those
reps last week, right? So that
no reps at all in 7-on-7 or
right.
11-on-11.
I guess let me rephrase that. My biggest indicator is where you get first team reps if you're getting the starting nod during the week, and that was the biggest thing for me. Is by Eddie's right, no reps at all, but not getting first team reps on that last Friday and it being Flacco that gets that. That was the decider for me. Ideally, I'd like to see a full participant label on him after today's practice, but I'm willing to concede a limited participant as long as by season's end or by week's end we're getting first team reps.
You know what makes no sense is the term crickets, right? Like, for example, play that sounder again. So we're going to do this again, Eddie, because it's a great sounder and it's good that you came up with it. But I'll give you an example, okay? Kenny Moore. Any idea of if Kenny Moore is in practice, then you play this, right? And everybody knows that means no one knows where, like, there's no response, right?
Yes.
But yet, when you're camping, or when you're out in the backyard, or it's the summertime, the one thing that you're aware of its presence is crickets. So how did the cricket noise become the euphemism for nowhere to be seen or heard from?
Counter to that. You know of the cricket. You don't know where the cricket is.
But you know it's there, right?
Sure. But I can't find it. I've tried to find it. There's one in the garage during the summer. I can't find it.
I'll put it to you this way. If you're camping, wouldn't you rather have a cricket there than somebody say, there's a tarantula, maybe, but we don't know, and I'm not going to tell you whether it's there or not. You just have to guess.
Sure, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
At least the cricket's letting you know. And I don't know if you know this or not, but this is a fun fact. Do you know that a cricket, if you count the number of times it chirps in a minute, there's a formula where you can then find out the exact temperature in Fahrenheit? Did you know that?
I did not.
Did you know that, Eddie?
No. I don't know if that's a myth or if that's real.
If you could, please look that up. You can fact check that right here live on the show. I believe it's actually factually
What is it
correct.
again? Number of
It's something, I believe it is the number of times that a cricket chirps in a minute. There is a formula that can be used to determine the exact Fahrenheit temperature. Maybe it's double or it's double plus
count the
10
number of chirps the cricket makes in 15 seconds.
Okay.
Add 40 to the number of chirps you counted. The sum gives you a rough estimate.
No, not
of
rough.
the temperature.
Exact. Not rough. No, exact. Kevin Gregory once told me this. If Kevin Gregory told me that, he's a meteorologist. He knows science stuff. Kevin Gregory once told me that was the case. When we were sitting outside one time at Channel 6, and you could hear crickets somewhere in the distance.
Is this under the same realm of science of lightning and then thunder and then how far away the storm is? Is it from that same cloth, would you say?
That's also true. That's
I know.
a fact.
I understand. I'm just asking if
That's right. See the things you learn in this program, Eddie?
educate and entertain.
Sure.
That's exactly what we do, Jimmy. Thank you. We educate and entertain on this program. The second, very questionable.
Anyway, I'd like to see Anthony Richardson be full participant by week's end. I would like it out of the gate, but I'm not hitting any alarm bells on that in his status report until we get to tomorrow and into Friday.
Right. The Friday's the real indicator. I mean, you know, it's like anything else. You want to see trajectory, right? You want to see some sort of indication that things are moving towards a certain direction. And in the case of Anthony Richardson, notably, now Jonathan Taylor is the one that probably you put the least investment on today and tomorrow, because at the running back position, I'm not saying that you can just plug a guy in and let him go, but I think it requires less.
Yes, you kind of can
Correct.
to some extent. I mean,
Correct.
yes, you want to be on the same page with audibles and different sets in general, but for the most part, Jonathan Taylor, as long as he gets a day of practice log, preferably that Thursday or Friday, good to go.
How would you have graded Trey Sermon in terms of his production and what he was able to do?
Probably, I mean, where my bar for him was probably about a B-, C+. I mean, he didn't pop off the page for me, but like it wasn't necessarily an element of that game that left me longing for more. I mean, again, I'm not going to sit there and look at the running back room and call it a total failure, even though we debated the offseason about Zach Moss and his departure and all that. However, the offensive output they had I had no issue whatsoever on Sunday with offensive personnel. 34 points should be enough to win in the National Football League. But to your overall question, how would I grade them? It's probably a B- on a curve, because you have to equate with the fact that what you're used to at that position is the very best the position has to offer.
Correct. I mean, there's no doubt that Jonathan Taylor, between the tackles, creates in defenses an anxiety that the others do not. But when he is not out there, while it is not in any way, shape, or form replicating that kind of a threat, you do get a little bit more presence of passing, or, receiving yards out of the backfield, or being able to utilize that to stretch things a little bit more so than you do when Jonathan Taylor's there.
I mean, Sermon and Goodson, 9 catches for 56 yards.
Yeah,
they used them the right way. I'll say that they used them differently, but they used them the right
expand
way.
a defense. They stretch a defense out just a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know that you get that, but for Taylor, I would anticipate that Taylor goes on Sunday, and maybe doesn't even start going through motions until Friday. That would be my expectation or assumption. But then again, you know what they say about assumptions, right?
Indeed.
By the way, on the Richardson front, I think it's important to note here, Derek Carr on Monday night suffered an oblique injury, and the Saints already ruled him out for 2 weeks. So I don't know if Richardson his injury is as severe as Derek Carr's, but the Raiders were quick to rule him out for 2 games.
And I think also that with Richardson, at this point still this year, and I know people, especially the way Flacco's played, but I do think that they're going to more often than not err on the side of caution. I just do, in terms of making sure that they are at all times putting him in the right direction. By the way, I mentioned that crickets are the sound of summer. There is a sound of autumn and a sound of, for that matter, winter that goes into spring. But the sound of a season change, and that is the fact that the Pacers are back on the hardwood. Last night, I realized it was just preseason, but there were some really good things. There were some exciting things, and then there were some things that left you wanting and feeling and wanting to see more of still uncertainty. We'll go over all of that on the other side. Okay, a couple of things here. First off, somebody pointed out the easiest way to explain why the term came of crickets is because you only hear crickets when there is nothing else heard or sounded or to be when there's nothing else seen or heard around.
Sure.
Therefore, like crickets is indicated that there's nothing around at all. So there you go.
And if there was sound, then you wouldn't hear the crickets.
Correct.
Yep.
Also, before we get to the Pacer game last night, basketball news right away. Eddie, you don't happen to have the breaking news sounder, do you?
I always have it.
Thank you. Trey Singleton, a four-star recruit out of Jeffersonville, one of the bigger recruits in the state of Indiana, announced his college decision today. He had narrowed it down to Virginia, Purdue, Louisville, amongst others, as well as Northwestern. Of those schools, Jimmy, the one that you think he selected was?
Give it to me again one more time. Sorry.
Virginia, Purdue, Louisville, Northwestern.
Virginia.
Eddie Garrison, your guess would be Virginia, Purdue, Louisville, Northwestern.
I've seen it, so I know what the answer is, Jake.
Trey Singleton has committed to Northwestern to play for the Wildcats. All right, last night, Pacers and Hawks. Thank you. Now, what would you have done if that had been Virginia? Do you have a Cavalier sound that you would have made? Or you would have just sounded Cavalier in general about that like you do with many of the topics?
You would have said all for one and one for all. That would have been
That's right.
Full transparency, Jake. I have a folder from our numbers game from the last
Outstanding.
March Madness.
Virginia
tournament.
wasn't in it, were they?
No, they were not.
Okay.
So I had.
They had to survive the
Well,
play-in.
hold on here. Let me check. Cavalier.
Because they were in the play-in.
Were they?
Yeah. Because we had to watch that abomination of Tony Bennett, and it was terrible.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, you're right. They got
Absolutely
blown off the
awful.
floor, right? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Maybe we did the game after the play-in game had taken place.
Yeah.
But last night in the Pacers-Hawks game, look, it was a great finish. I mean, you know, Atlanta at the line, they missed. The ball gets tapped out. They hit a huge three. And then the Pacers had a chance, that presence of mind to call the timeout with like 0.3 of a second left, I think. And they end up not winning the game. But the main story here is this in terms of takeaways. It is preseason, so it's difficult to tell. But I thought personally the two things that jumped out at me, one of them was I really liked James Wiseman. And we see this sometimes where you get kind of transfixed or excited about a player, and then that player, once the regular season hits, you know, we know that Wiseman is going to be a guy that probably only sees the floor. If Isaiah Jackson, as was the case last night, is not available, or Miles Turner's not available, or whatever it may be. But what you want is a guy that can just give you some, 10 to 12 quality minutes in that situation. He looked like a guy that can do that. I still, Jimmy, want to see a little bit more out of, just from a minute standpoint, out of Jarris Walker, truth be told.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, he looked good in that second quarter, and there were flashes as well with the first. The biggest takeaway for me was not that I was doubting this, but it was just a thought in my mind that I'm going to watch all season. The pace at which they play and the efficiency with which they had a year ago, is that really their identity, and that historic level is sustainable?
Right.
And at least out of the gate, when the starters were out there, they looked like they were humming along like it was the home stretch of the regular season. So that's something that I want to continue to keep an eye on. But yeah, I was happy with the early returns from Jarris Walker. And as you highlighted with Wiseman, that's really all you're asking for of him, is just to be a lottery ticket role player that's just asked to fill a void for 7 to 10, 12 minutes a night while you're giving guys like Miles Turner a rest. So I was happy with what I saw.
Chris Denari in 13 minutes will go over a lot of this from last night. I guess the big takeaway, Jimmy, would be this. One preseason game, it's kind of hard to me, in a preseason game, you want to go away from it and say, okay, there were no players that all of a sudden created new questions, which is good news, right? I mean, there's not somebody that you go, wait, what's going on with this guy? For the most part, I thought Andrew Nembhard looked good. I mean, you see out of players the continuation of what you expected them or expect them to be. A guy that I thought, when I was watching it's tough to tell when guys get in rotation and they're on the floor with guys that are not going to be on the roster probably in the regular season or in critical minutes. But Ben Shepherd, again, continued to show that he kind of does what it is that Shepherd last year took him a while to develop the consistency of outside shot. We knew that was part of his game coming in, and yet it took a while to see it. And then once it came, what I really like is you could start to see that Ben Shepherd, the rookie stripes are off for certain, because he's been in big moments now, and he's been in big games, and he's been in big situations, and he just looks at this point far more comfortable than he did a year ago, feeling himself out and figuring out what to do. And his shot and his ability to know like when to take that shot and when to pass away. I thought last year he was rushed a little bit. He looked a lot more comfortable.
That really is the underlying story of this team, is familiarity now. There's a lot of pieces that either were rookies a year ago, like Ben Shepherd, as you outlined, or pieces that were added mid to late in the season last year that now you're hoping the conversation of getting used to Rick Carlisle's system is gone now. Now it's familiarity and knowing where everybody is and continuity as a whole with that roster. You want to see the growth, of course, from guys like Ben Shepherd, as you outlined there. It's one preseason game. I'm not going to suddenly say that Jarris Walker has found his home in the NBA, but I hope he certainly has and is found a role on this team. But that's the part we don't talk about enough that will be such a key component to them taking another step forward this season, is not having to just plug holes anymore and get familiar on the fly with an offense, having an entire offseason to grow and develop, and hopefully that leads to, as I mentioned, another step forward for this group.
Eddie, we have tickets to give away for the Driven to Save Lives film that's going to be taking place on Saturday, 6:30 at the Tobias Theater in Newfields, which is right there at 38th in Michigan. And this is the story of Brian Clausen, and not only Brian Clausen the racer, but Brian Clausen the hero, and the connection between his family and the family of those that he helped save through organ donation, all part of Driven to Save Lives. We have two pairs. Now, is it pair or pairs? Do we know which is the
pairs?
Are you sure?
Yes.
2 pairs of tickets to give away, right?
Yep.
So we have 4 total tickets that will be given away and distributed amongst 2 different winners, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have we determined the time or the method in which we are going to be giving away said tickets? Because I know we have Denari coming up, and we've got a fairly loaded show today.
We should do 1 pair now and then another pair in an hour from now, maybe.
Okay, I like that. And are we just doing this as a caller number, or are we doing? You are always the gatekeeper of these things, so I'd like to know. By the way, if you could eat one candy the rest of your life, would it be cherry flavored Pez? No, that's what Vern says in Stand By Me. That's your. I'm going to at least once a week now refer. I can't get it out of my head that you're Vern.
But the beard is not very Vern-like, right?
But Eddie has a very baby face, right?
Doesn't
he, Eddie? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, if I shaved my face, you would see how much younger it makes me look.
Right.
Okay.
And Vern brings a comb so that their hair always looks good, and Eddie's hair is always like impeccably waved over.
It is perfection at its finest, indeed, for Eddie Garrison.
Do you find it condescending that I say you're Vern?
I don't know who Vern is, so I can't say yes and I can't say no.
Can you pull up a picture of the Stand By Me cast and see which one Vern is? Now, I will tell you that the guy that plays Vern did very well for himself, so be happy with that, right? Now, if you were to look at the Stand By Me, the group of kids.
One day you could be a part of the company, Vern. Is that what the goal is?
If you were to look at the group of kids from it, Vern Tessio, which one do you think would be Vern, Eddie? Which one reminds you of yourself if you look at the group of kids?
I'm looking at the group right now, and the one in the red shirt, maybe? Or the striped?
It's the one in the striped shirt. The one in the red shirt's Gordy. Then you got River Phoenix. You got, obviously, Corey Feldman.
Here's what I
Jerry
think's
O'Connell.
happening. Hold on
Jerry
a second.
O'Connell is
Here's what
Vern.
I think's happening.
Anyway, we're giving away tickets.
No, but what happened here is you saw Vern,
Sincerely.
and you see a big head child, and
That's
then you
right.
associate
That's
with
kind
Eddie
of
Garrison.
it, yes.
I think that's what happened.
Okay, we're giving away the tickets in what fashion here, Eddie Garrison?
Well, considering that you just wasted time to get to know your listener, we'll have to do with a caller
I
number.
don't think we wasted time at all. I can get to know your listener in very quick fashion. It's one of the strengths that I have. It's one of my skills. 239-1070 is the telephone number, by the way, if you would like to go, again, to the Driven to Save Lives film. This is going to be at 6:30 on this Saturday at the Tobias Theater at Newfields, and then afterwards there will be a Q&A session with the producers and the filmmakers. I'm happy and honored, I guess, flattered enough to say that I will be the one that will be monitoring that Q&A session. So look forward to seeing you, like we will see Dennis the Menace, who yesterday was the winner, and that's who you will be joining. Judy, is that who we are setting up? Hi, Judy. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. We do a little thing called Get to Know Your Listener, Judy, and we'll do this quickly. But you are female listener number 16 of the program. We're thrilled with that. And
Awesome.
so I'm curious, Judy, if you don't mind me asking so, what bet did you lose that has you listening to this radio show?
I listen every day, Jake. I love your show.
Do you really?
I do.
Well, that's very much appreciated. Judy, are you native to Indianapolis?
I am.
And
I live in Greenwood.
Okay, and your favorite team of the Indianapolis teams is which?
Purdue. I went to Purdue. So
Okay, well, that's cool.
Oilers all the way.
All right, and Judy, how long have you been listening to this program?
Oh, gosh, probably 10 years, maybe.
Okay, so you're a regular listener of the radio station, right?
I am.
Okay, well, listen, we appreciate the fact that throughout some of the changes that you've stuck with us and given it time. Judy, I look forward to meeting you in person on Saturday because we will be setting you up to see Brian Clausen's very inspiring story. I think you will enjoy the film, and the film will be over by 8 o'clock, Q&A until about 8:30. So it should be a nice night, and then maybe go out and get dinner or whatever it might be afterwards. But I certainly appreciate you listening to this program, Judy.
Oh, thank you very much.
All right, boiler up, Judy, and appreciate you taking part in Get to Know Your Listener. Chris Denari talking about the Pacers next. Got underway with their preseason last night down in Atlanta. Came up on the short end of it, but it was one of those that it was such a good finish to the game, and then you had to remind yourself. You kind of get the competitive juices flowing. You're like, come on, and then you're like, it's preseason, but a crazy finish for the Hawks. Joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line, he is the television voice of the Indiana Pacers, Chris Denari, joining us. And I guess in that capacity, Chris, I'll start with this, and we'll get to the game last night. In terms of the preseason, if you could, last night people were able to watch the game on NBA TV. I don't know, and so I will allow you to expand here on how much people will be able to see on Bally's for the Pacers through the preseason and then obviously into the regular season as well.
Yeah, Jake, thanks. Great to be with you. And I do like Havarti cheese, so I just wanted to let you guys know.
Thank you.
It
Thank
comes from
you,
Danish
Chris.
cows.
Thank
yes.
you.
I am a big fan. Yes, absolutely. I have Havarti in the refrigerator, so yes.
Love it.
Absolutely. We will do the 2 home games next week, Monday against Memphis when Zach Edey is in town, and then next Thursday against Charlotte. And then during the course of the regular season, there are only 4 games that we can't do. Those are TNT exclusives. So we will have the remainder of the schedule on Bally Sports Indiana. And again, Bally Sports is on Comcast Xfinity. It's on DirecTV. I have DirecTV Stream. I have it. It's on Spectrum. It's on virtually all the cables. I know it's not on YouTube TV or Hulu. I think there's going to be some news here coming up. I've been trying to decipher through it. There's the Bally Sports Plus app, but it looks like there's a possibility that the Bally Sports Plus app will be housed at Amazon Prime. So I would say for, those fans that don't have access through their cable or DirecTV stream or whatever, we'll see in the next week, just what kind of information is out there. But, it's the whole crew is back. As much as there's continuity on the floor with 13 of the 15 back from last year, we're all back as well. Quinn Buckner and I for our 19th year together. Jeremiah Johnson on the sideline, Pat Boylan in the locker room, Jamie Burns directing, Brian Woodrum producing. So continuity off the floor as well. And again, Bally Sports will have all the games this year.
Chris, when one game, obviously, it's hard to get any questions answered, if you will. I mean, in terms of the preseason. But I'm curious from your standpoint, going into it and transitioning into the regular season. As you mentioned, there's a lot of running it back here, understandably so, because it's a roster that really time is all that really is needed, I think. But your question marks going in, if you had one thing that you had to say is the biggest question mark for you about the Pacers going into the year, it would be what?
Well, I think the improvement that they need to make defensively, we saw some of that last year. I think, through December, I think their record was 14-14. They were 28th in the NBA defensively. And then after that, they were 18th. And I think when you play at a fast pace offensively, you're going to give up points. It's just the nature of the game. I mean, they were the 6th highest scoring offense in NBA history last year at 123 points per game. So in a game that has that many points, you're not going to win 123 to 105. I mean, usually the average margin of a good team is 5 to 6 points. So you're going to give up somewhere between 115 and 118. But I think that's one of the things, Jake and Jimmy and Eddie, that they've been working on in the preseason. They focus a lot on defense. They understand they must be better. They saw in the Eastern Conference Finals that when it came to lockdown time, Boston had a very strong defense. So they know that that's an area that they have to improve. I think the great strength of this team is its depth. You've got at least 11 or 12 players who legitimately can be on the floor at any one time. So I think that'll be the interesting thing. And will we see what we saw in the postseason last year? We saw this team play a lot of full court pressure. And maybe that's something that you don't often see in the NBA in the regular season, but because of the depth that this team has, that may be a calling card. So I just think this team needs to improve defensively. They know that, and that's something that I think we'll be watching as the season rolls on.
TV voice of the Indiana Pacers, Chris Denari, is our guest. He joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Chris, clearly they believe that this is going to be the case because of the money they doled out to him in the offseason. But I keep coming back to how different the conversation was on TJ McConnell this time last year to where it is now, where he's a focal point of that second unit. And a year ago, it was, well, I don't know where the spot is for the rotation for him, but we'll know he'll be ready. For McConnell, at age 32, he's beloved by the entire Pacers fan base. He's certainly one of my favorite Pacers. Is what he showed again last night in the preseason, what he did for that second unit throughout the entirety of the playoff run last year, is that sustainable again over the course of an 82-game season? And do they need that level of production from him, or do they expect that burden to be lessened this year?
No, I think TJ feels like he has a number of really good years left, and you're right. You saw him last night, orchestrate a lot of things. He had 10 points, 4 from the field, couple of rebounds, 3 assists, a steal. He even had a block shot last night. So I do think he's an integral part, and you're right. It is much different than a year ago. Rick Carlisle said one of the toughest conversations he's ever had to have as a coach is he sat down in the preseason just before the season started and told T.J. McConnell that he was probably not going to be in the rotation. And that's because at that time, Andrew Nembhard was coming off the bench and was the backup point guard. It all changed, especially when Nembhard moved into the starting lineup alongside Tyrese Halliburton. That sort of freed up the opportunity for TJ to get those backup point guard minutes. So I just think his energy, what he provides off the bench, that spark, his ability to throw alley-oop passes and really engage Obi Toppin. I think Benedict Mathurin, will benefit playing alongside T.J. McConnell. I think he's very much a key for this team this year.
When you look at the roster from top to bottom, though, Chris, and I totally agree with everything you just said about him still being a key component, but will they need him to be that again, or do you envision some of that workload as the rotation itself advances and grows and maybe more opportunities come for Benedict Mathurin as a starter? I know I'm putting the cart before the horse there, but do you envision they will still need that same level of dominance from him as a second unit player as they so heavily relied on a year ago?
Well, Jimmy, good point. And the question is, because I talked about the depth, Jarris Walker moving into the 3 position, he didn't play much last year. Ben Shepherd, the other rookie from a year ago, we saw him play a lot in the postseason. Once Benedict Mathurin went down in the Buddy Hield trade, you really needed somebody like Ben Shepherd. So I think you're right. I think this team has more available players than it probably even had a year ago. And I would, as I prepare my charts and do my work getting ready for the season, I don't know if there's any team in the NBA, quote unquote, that is as deep as the Pacers. Again, you guys talked about James Wiseman. I thought he was very impressive last night. I really liked what I've seen in practice. I thought he had a really good fan jam scrimmage, and it gives you that depth behind Turner and Isaiah Jackson that you're going to need in an 82-game season. So to your point, I do think this team has more players that they can rely on night in, night out, that it doesn't just have to fall on one of those bench players to be the orchestrator.
Chris, to piggyback off what you just said, is there any player on the roster that last year's deep playoff run benefited more than Ben Shepherd? Because to me, it was kind of a baptism by fire of those big moments. And I know for a lot of those players, that was the first time they'd been through that. But Shepherd also was having to learn, he and Walker being the rookies, and Walker wasn't in rotation yet. I just thought last night even that Shepherd, and I know it's a preseason game in Atlanta, right? But Shepherd just looked already – you could kind of see the training wheels coming off before your very eyes in the latter part of last season. Am I giving that too much credit?
No, that's a good point, Jake, because I was talking to my partner, Quinn Buckner, and we talked last night, and exactly what you said. There was a point in the game, and I think he missed the shot, but it was the shot that he took that was sort of a step-back shot, and we didn't really see that last year. He was a guy that would catch and shoot and really have to shoot.
How are the doggies, Chris? Are the doggies okay? That's you've got 2 rescues,
three
right?
Of them. So
3 now, right?
Yeah, so I think that was Augie that as I'm closing the door to my office.
Does he need more Connecticut water?
Yeah, he might. Yeah, he might need to chill out a little bit. But no, I think there are things that I saw last night, and there are things that I have seen in practice that he just looks more comfortable. And there are some shots that he will take that he didn't even think about taking a year ago. And I think that's the confidence of playing with this group and just being a year older and a year wiser in the NBA.
Chris Denari is our guest, the television voice of the Indiana Pacers. He is on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line. Chris, I was intrigued. I will continue to be intrigued by James Wiseman. I thought last night he looked good in the minutes that he got. Again, big difference between that and a December in-season tournament game, I realize. But was he a guy that Indiana took a flyer on because they had the availability to do so, or is there a specific void that they felt he could fill?
I think two things. I think, one, when Jalen Smith opted to sign a free agent deal with Chicago, it opened up the third center spot. And when you look at an 82-game season, you need three bigs, at some point, because there's going to be injuries, you're in back-to-backs, all those kinds of things. So I think, one, he filled a need. And I think the other, pretty low risk, high reward. I think, this is a guy that was at Golden State. He was the number 2 pick overall, really didn't pan out there, was injured, missed an entire season, then goes to Detroit, a team that's very young. But they signed him early enough in the summer that he was around his teammates all summer long. In fact, I remember watching one of the summer league games, and the entire roster was out there, and there was James Wiseman with them. So I think it's twofold. I think it's a great opportunity for him to sort of showcase what he is and what he hopes to be, and it comes at the right time with the right price for the Pacers, because when you've given Pascal Siakam a max contract, you've got Tyrese Halliburton, you extended Nembhard, you extended McConnell, you got a new contract for Obi Toppin. You've got to have some guys on lesser deals, and clearly James Wiseman is on that. And so I just think it's a great opportunity for both parties. And the Pacers have done a really good job over the last few years of taking people, and I want to say rehabbing their career, but giving them another chance. Look at Aaron Nesmith, what he's become for the Pacers after his first 2 seasons in Boston. Obi Toppin had an excellent year last year, and now has re-signed with the Pacers. So I think the track record of this coaching staff working with players is well known, and I'm sure that James Wiseman and his agent said, hey, that's a place that I can go and do some good things.
Chris, doesn't it seem like sometimes guys, it's not an indictment on players' like mental approach, but sometimes we see it in all sports. Sometimes guys just need a place where they can kind of blend in at start as opposed to being a spotlighted player right away. And Obi Toppin's a good example of that. There was so much expectation for him in New York for a variety of different reasons, where and how he was acquired, the fact that he's from the area, etc. Then he comes here, and then he's allowed to – he really blossoms because there wasn't this, like, super spotlight on him. And sometimes you can benefit from that as a franchise, and I think that means the player isn't mentally strong, and it's not that as much as just you kind of need to get away a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I think for James Wiseman, I think the opportunity here, and just no disrespect to Detroit, the Pacers have to go there in a couple of weeks, and those are the games, just like last night against Atlanta. They've got some good young talent. Detroit does as well. Those are the scary teams you have to play. But for James Wiseman, he can come to a program in a franchise that really has reestablished itself, after missing the playoffs for 3 straight years. But the progression and the growth that this team has taken, from Rick Carlisle, from 25 wins to 35 wins to 47 wins, and now trying to either maintain that or take that next step as far as the regular season is concerned, I think that can only help a young player like James Wiseman.
Okay, Chris, my annual question, okay? You're a Pacer fan. You have been telling your your buddy or your wife, whoever it might be, that you would like to go to an away Pacer game. You've saved up a little bit of coin to be able to make it happen. I'm not talking about Los Angeles, that's a given. I'm not talking about Miami, that's a given. New York City's a given. Tell me the Chris Denari recommendation on a place that is maybe an off-radar city, but it's got a nice, easy, walkable downtown, some good restaurants, fans seem pretty friendly and hospitable, where somebody could go for an away game and be able to enjoy 2 days or so to enjoy a Pacer game.
Well, I think Orlando, they've got a nice new arena the last number of years. They've got restaurants downtown. I think Orlando would be a place that I would recommend because, of the walkability. I've always been a big fan of San Antonio. Now, the arena is away from downtown, but usually most people, everybody stays downtown around the Riverwalk, and it would not be, a far Uber to get to the game. I think those are two places that I would recommend. San Antonio with Wembanyama, I mean, they've got a rabid fan base. And I think Orlando is they're a lot like the Pacers. They're a young and up-and-coming team. So those are two places, again, like you said, a little bit more off the radar than when you think of Madison Square Garden or Crypto.com or those types of things.
It's going to be fun, Chris, because Orlando's one of those. I just think the East, listen, what Indiana did last year was awesome, right? It was so fun, Pacers and Racers and all of it. It goes without saying. And I'm not saying they can't do it again, but, man, I mean, Orlando is a team that just – I love their length and their athleticism and their youth. I think Banchero is a really good player. And then Cleveland I would expect to be better. And I'm not – Chicago I don't know. But Philadelphia now is going to be – I mean, I just think the East is loaded. It's going to be fascinating.
Oh, I do too. I mean, the GM ratings just came out, and the Pacers, when it all was said and done, were picked 7th. They were 6th last year, firmly in the playoffs. 7th would put you in the play-in. I mean, that's how deep it is with Milwaukee and Orlando and Cleveland and New York and Boston. Miami wasn't even listed in the top 7. So I think it's going to be very, very competitive. A lot of people point to the West, and it will be difficult there. I mean, think about it. Golden State didn't even make the playoffs last year. I think both conferences in their own right are very, very deep. I think right now in the NBA there's as much parity as there's ever been. You've had 6 straight NBA champions that are different. Over the last 6 years, you've had 14 different teams in conference finals. That's nearly half the league. And you've had 9 different teams in the NBA finals. So I think we're at a really good point. There's a lot of young talent. I mean, we saw one of those last night. The number 1 draft pick, Revsine. I thought he was really good last night for Atlanta. So I think as a basketball fan, as an NBA fan, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Chris Denari is our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, TV voice of the Indiana Pacers. Chris, there's been a lot of talk this offseason, as expected, when you have a star player of his caliber, about Tyrese Halliburton and his motivation going into this season, the lack of being able to stay healthy, regrettably, in that final series against Boston, and then, as you mentioned, kind of a disrespect in regards to how the Pacers are viewed around the rest of the Eastern Conference. Would you say his level of motivation after missing out at the last series last year and wanting another step forward in his career arc and with this team, would you say that motivation is overstated and understated going into this year for him?
Well, he mentioned on Media Day, and you go to the Olympics where he earned a gold medal but did not play very much at all. And he said that was a humbling experience and also something that he will use as motivation. Everybody uses motivation differently, and I think Tyrese is an immensely talented person who probably doesn't need a lot of motivation, but I think he will use all of those things. I think to a man right now, what they accomplished last year, some people disrespected that because of the injuries that Milwaukee and New York had. I always like to say last year in the regular season, the Pacers beat Giannis and the Bucks 4 or 5 times when Giannis was on the floor. But, they still have things that they need to prove. And just because they did what they did last year doesn't mean you'll do it again this year. So I do think he has a level of motivation, both personally and from the team standpoint that he's really focused on showing, what this franchise can do. He committed to the Pacers. The Pacers committed to him for 5 years. There are no team options. There are no player options. This was Tyrese Halliburton wanting to put his imprint on this franchise, on this city, and I'm excited to see him do that this year.
Pacers in Cleveland tomorrow night, and then it is here for Memphis on Monday, a week from tomorrow night. They're in they take on Charlotte, I should say. Then the regular season underway. You can see every game but 4 of them on Valley Sports Indiana with Chris Denari and Quinn Buckner. Of course, Jeremiah, as we talked about, Pat Boylan as well. And Chris joins us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. Chris, always a pleasure, and look forward to a fun season and talking to you throughout it.
All right, look forward to it, guys. Thank you.
Chris Denari joining us on the show. I'm excited about it. I enjoy just the season in general. I think it's going to be fascinating, Jimmy, for the fact that, as we just talked about, I just think the East is a logjam. And last year, the Pacers, quite frankly, they came together and gelled together really well, but at the same time, they were healthy during times when a lot of teams were not. And they took advantage of that, don't get me wrong. But, Milwaukee with that combo, if they're healthy, New York is going to be fascinating. I personally think New York, I'm intrigued by that trade, but I think that DiVincenzo and what he brings to that table just in terms of the way that they space that floor and the shooting that they get from that. Karl Anthony Towns is a great player, but their ball movement was so unique and so special that I wonder how that impacts it. Julius Randle would have been the same impact probably, right?
I mean, I think it's an improvement. He was kind of a logjam at that point. My biggest issue with the Pacers and what fascinates me about the fan base is they won 47 games last year. They should overachieve in that department. But if you're measuring it solely based on if they miss out on the conference finals, that's a failure of a season for them this year. I mean, it's a big bar to attain, as Chris outlined, in a league that feels full of parity across the board.
Big bar, by the way. What's the big bar in Nashville? Is it Tootsie's? Is that the name of the place?
I think so.
Sounds right.
Right there on Broadway. We went. I don't think we went to that one when I went to the Hootie and the Blowfish concert, but we hit a couple of the bars on Broadway. I did an event for IndyCar on Broadway just before the race weekend got underway down there when I did the show from Nashville down there. And it is, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, every bar feels like a big bar in Nashville. The reason I mentioned Nashville, by the way, that's where the Colts are going to be this weekend. Taking on the Tennessee Titans. Paul Kuharsk is a longtime writer covering the Titans, was at ESPN, now independently covers the Titans down there. Talked to him yesterday and said, hey, I'm the guy that was sitting next to you during the Combine. And he actually didn't get up and walk away during the time that he was listening to us do the show. And I said, any chance you can join tomorrow and talk about what's going on with the Titans? And he said, absolutely. And he said, what time? And I said, how about like in 6 seconds from now? And he said, what's that? I don't mean that. I mean 6 seconds from now. I'm actually about to go to a break. And then when we come back, Paul's going to be with us. Okay, we gave you the Colts side of things in terms of their practice and what they are anticipated to see today. Anthony Richardson is expected to go through some reps. Jonathan Taylor is not. Ryan Kelly is on the practice field. But in terms of their foe coming up this weekend, the Tennessee Titans down in Nashville. Joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, longtime writer that covers the Titans and now doing so for PaulKuharsk.com. That's Kuharsky. PaulKuharsk.com joins us on the program. Paul, a pleasure, and let's begin with this. Tennessee is coming off their first win of the season over a pretty depleted Miami team. Do we know yet or have really a feel for identity of the Titans so long as Will Levis is their quarterback?
Yeah, the identity of the Titans with Will Levis as their quarterback for right now, it's the same as it was for under Mike Vrabel for most of his 6 years here. Run, see if you can do some play action off of that, play good defense, scrape by probably with 17 points. They did score 30 for the first time in 38 games in over 1,000 days against Miami. It was a real testament to how bad Miami is. It included 5 field goals and a safety, just 2 touchdowns. But this team doesn't look a lot different than it did during the last 2 years of the Vrabel era when it was pretty bad. I mean, there's just a certain flatness. Levis, 9 turnovers, 6 interceptions, hasn't had any fumble luck or anything like that, not getting a lot of balls dropped by the other team. So he's got the downside of Richardson and not really the upside of Richardson at this point, which is something I'm working on because last year we saw him make some really terrific throws, and you would think that would go up under Brian Callahan, but it hasn't.
So with that, Levis is, I have read obviously that they are sticking by Will Levis. I mean, this is going to be a year, I think, and you tell me if I'm wrong in this, Paul. In Indianapolis, the narrative with the Colts or the thought process with the Colts, I think it's almost fact, is that this year is about the development of Anthony Richardson, first and foremost above all else. Is that where Tennessee is with Levis, or is Levis getting, and are they standing by him just because there isn't another option?
No, it is both, but it's about giving Levis every chance to grow through the bumps and bruises and ups and downs of being a young quarterback. I mean, we all know that the Jaden Daniels path is rare. Will Levis didn't have that kind of stock or pedigree coming in. You got to wait it out for a guy and give him a chance. And, Will Levis probably doesn't have enough time with this organization, right? He's more likely, if he's successful in the league, to be a Geno Smith or a Sam Darnold. I don't know if he'll be their quality, but it's more likely 4 years in with his second or third team that he's a functional veteran quarterback on a good team with good coaching. Not that this couldn't be that team, but most of the time that first team gives up on you. You go sit somewhere, and then you get a mid-level contract somewhere. And you have a chance. There's a tier of quarterbacks that are that now, right? Didn't used to be that way, but it seems like that's a path now. I don't know if Will Levis going to have enough time to do that here, but it's conceivable to me he's the quarterback here at least through next year. They get a good draft pick this year, maybe can trade it to somebody that wants one of these quarterbacks more than they do. They talk about wanting 8, 9, 10 picks in a draft. They haven't had that in a long time. Maybe they could trade down. They need a young receiver. They need a pass rusher. They need a right tackle. There's still a lot for them to build on. And Mason Rudolph doesn't offer them anything like Joe Flacco offers. They have a real choice in Indianapolis where they could probably win some legitimate games with Joe Flacco, whose ceiling is a lot higher than Mason Rudolph's.
Paul Kuharsk is our guest. Paul, assuming it is Will Levis that winds up going this weekend, and I know that it all depends on his health, but from a standpoint of the Colts, I look at their defense and I look at career day after career day being doled out by opposing quarterbacks, by opposing running backs, and I don't want to get too narrative-y here, but it would feel like to me a great opportunity for a get-right game for Will Levis and the Titans, just like we saw from the Jaguars a week ago. Am I reading too much into that? Or when you look at what the Colts have to offer defensively, especially if they're as battered health-wise as they have been, that this very well could be a feast opportunity for Tennessee, even as bad as they are?
Well, yeah, I think it'd be a terrific opportunity for them to get right. They are at their best by far if they can shape a game. And Tony Pollard has been pretty good. He's getting hit early. I mean, the offensive line wants to they really wanted to feel good about their run game coming out of Miami, right? They had 140 yards, but like 40 carries. And he was getting contacted by the defense behind the line of scrimmage most of the time. The running backs, he and Tyjae Spears, doing a lot of the work themselves. But that was one to feel good about, right? They found a win and everything. If they could come into the Indianapolis game, kind of set the tone by running those guys and be kind of old school Titans. That's what, I'm not comparing Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill by any means, but you guys know that's what they feasted on. Run it effectively, and then find the play action plays off of that and throw it less. If you could have 17 or 20 or 22 dropbacks, that would be ideal for Will Levis. And then they haven't gotten Calvin Ridley going. He's got 9 catches through 4 games, which is ridiculous for a $50 million guaranteed wide receiver with speed, which they've been desperate for. If they could shape the game like that, play good defense, Levis maybe minimize the mistakes for a change, or even, just make one big one, and then maybe you get the same out of Richardson or more.
Paul, when you look at, if you're Shane Steichen and you are getting into the film of the Tennessee Titans, what's keeping you awake at night if you're Shane Steichen, of saying to yourself, that's the area we've got to make sure we control against these guys?
I think Shane Steichen can sleep well this week. I mean, there's nothing super fearsome about the Titans. They cover well. They've got a good secondary. L'Jarius Sneed, his numbers aren't that good because he's made a few mistakes, but he can stick with somebody. Chidobe Awuzi's out, but they've got a rookie in Jarvis Brownlee who's a very good physical cover guy. They're a physical coverage unit. Roger McCreary in the slot, a very good coverage guy. The safety's a little slow, but physical, and Condre Diggs and Amani Hooker, who you guys have seen for years here, their back end is good, but they're not a very good rush team at all. Tavondre Sweat, I mean, Jonathan Taylor, if he plays, isn't going to – you can't run up the middle against these guys, whether Jeffrey Simmons is out there or not with his elbow. So you've got to run on the perimeter, and but plenty of teams have. Miami couldn't, but a lot of other teams have. Jeffrey Simmons is proud of saying nobody runs on the Tennessee Titans. What he really means is nobody runs up the middle, and then he takes victory lap. Hey, we lost, but nobody ran up the middle.
So Shane Steichen tonight about 10 o'clock, comfortable, right? Getting a good night's sleep, getting up tomorrow refreshed. All right. I like it now.
Well, I'm sure he's got things to not sleep over based on the Colts' problems, but I don't think he's got Titans have no superstars. Titans haven't beaten anybody but Miami. Titans have shot themselves in the foot repeatedly. I don't think there's a Titans face in his head.
By the way, Paul, I got a side gig for you. You ready for a side hustle?
Sure.
You know that Cameo deal that people get where they get celebrities to call and, wish them a happy birthday or whatever? You couldn't do this by video, but by phone you could be the Cameo of Bill Polian. Anybody ever told you that on the telephone you sound exactly like Bill Polian?
I've spent a lot of time with Bill. I've never gotten that.
Your voice is.
I'll be fake. Bill.
All right.
Like Robert Mathis and Reggie Wayne need to be next in the Hall of Fame. I don't know what the weight is.
All right. Well, there you go. Paul, we appreciate it as always, man. I know it's short notice, and I know you got a busy activity down there. Look forward to it. We'll get you again when things come back up here for the Colts and the Titans. But appreciate the perspective, and look forward to talking to you again.
Happy to help out. Good to be with you guys.
All right, Paul Kuharsk again, paulkuharsk.com, and Bill Polian sound alike on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. Eddie, we have movie tickets to give away again, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll do it at 239-1070 on the other side.
Judy.
Oh, yeah, Judy, if you're still listening, you need to call back. Eddie needs your information to get you the ticket to get your tickets to you. But we're talking about tickets for the Brian Clausen movie Saturday night, Tobias Theater at Newfields, and we'll do it all next. So we have tickets to give away for the Driven to Save Lives film, part of the Heartland Film Festival. It is Saturday night at 6:30. There will be a Q&A afterwards with the producers and filmmakers. All of this is taking place at the Tobias Theater in Newfields. If you would like to go, 239-1070 is the telephone number. We'll do that in just a second. But, Jimmy, to put kind of a tie on what Paul was saying, that's pretty candid. That's pretty honest in the fact of, I know the Titans are kind of in rebuild mode, but basically it almost sounds like they're more in FUBAR mode when he says, look, Shane Steichen can sleep just fine, right?
Yeah, I mean, whenever you're having anybody that's covering the team utter that phrase, and in Paul's experience as anybody, yeah, that tells you all you need to know about where the Titans are. I expect them to be a team that is selling at the deadline. I think there's going to be a lot of interest in guys like DeAndre Hopkins. I don't know if they would want to move, especially with the money that's there, nor would a team be interested in a guy like Calvin Ridley. He's probably somebody you still keep in-house, but yeah, I think they're going to be having plenty of suitors when the trade deadline rolls around here in a couple weeks.
I mean, Hopkins is obviously a talented player, but doesn't it feel like, to me, and I know that this is a weird thing to say, but to me it feels like the wide receiver position is the one where guys like have a window of time where they are like living on the high hog, and it's like, holy cow, this guy's like a game changer. And it's like a 2-year window, and then all of a sudden they become just like trade deadline salary cap guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
he certainly feels that way, doesn't he?
Sure. I mean, he's not anywhere near the player that he was 3, 4, 5 years ago. But what happens at the wide receiver position is, yes, you're right, Jake. For the most part, you have your Mike Evans and your players that are Tyreek Hill that seem like they're always at number one wide receiver level caliber. But for a lot of these guys, as they get older, you have to reinvent yourself and figure out how you can still be creative and beneficial for an offense. I would look at a team like, I mean, obviously I'm showing my lens here, but I would look at a team like Kansas City or an injury-riddled wide receiving core where you add a veteran piece like that maybe helps you in a short-term window versus a long-term commitment to a guy like DeAndre Hopkins.
Hopkins is also injured. He had a knee sprain in
He's
training
kind of
camp.
always injured, isn't he?
I
don't mean it that way.
He got hurt at the end of last year, and then he hurt his knee again. It was like I don't know what ligament it was, but he sprained a ligament right before the season started, and he hasn't played the full amount of snaps that he normally plays. He's only in there about half the time, and he just hasn't been able to get going because of it.
He's in every rumor mill when you look at trade
is.
articles of where he could end up. He's right there amongst the mix of them. So again, that he's a older veteran piece. The Titans are not a contender by any stretch of the imagination. Wouldn't surprise me at all if he's moved.
Yeah, I just the injury aspect of it, it just feels like, and maybe it's because of where Hopkins has gone. I mean, when he was in Houston, you were talking about obviously one
of the best wide receivers in the league. Like, you can go that far. When he was in Houston at the height of his powers, he was
I
one
think
of
that's
the
fair.
yeah. Like
Right?
that's not a stretch by any means.
and then
He had that one or two good seasons in Arizona, and then it coincided with him getting older and Kyler Murray falling off the face of the earth. And now Murray's back, but Hopkins obviously in
well, you
Tennessee.
never hear about Kyler Murray though.
You don't. I mean, you get.
Is Kyler Murray? I don't know, because is he starting to rebound back now that he's healthy into the form that validates him being the number one player taken in the draft?
I mean, I would say yes, but I would also argue the fact that adding Marvin Harrison Jr. has helped tremendously for that offense. He finally has they have a lot of good pieces out there, but he finally has a bona fide, still best years ahead of him, top weapon in an offense where he just didn't have that the last couple of seasons. So would I still stand by not paying him? That's what you're asking me. But if you're asking, is he?
Do you remember when Kyler Murray was the subject of what's the video game?
He still is, and didn't he get an endorsement with them?
Call of Duty,
too?
yes.
So he has an endorsement with them now too, as well.
But so for those that are unfamiliar, somebody had gone back and done research on Call of Duty. Is kind of like the iPhone. Like, what is it? They come out with new editions of it, or new
they come out with a new
variations
Call of
of
Duty
it.
every year. Yes.
And so somebody went back and looked, and the games or the weeks that would immediately follow when Call of Duty would be released, Kyler Murray's numbers like drastically plummeted, and people were like, "Wait a minute, is this guy staying up
double
until all
XP
hours
weekend.
of the night?"
He's got to be
That's
there.
what
It was. Yeah, they were tracking. So they have these double XP weekends for those not in the video game lingo. Double experience points, where the more as you play, you're getting double the points to get better weapons and better gear and all that. And that was another layer of his times his play would drop, is they would have a double XP weekend, and you would look, and then that Sunday his numbers just be right down the toilet
because he was up all night playing video games.
Correct. Yeah.
What's the last video game that kept you up all night?
I'm currently playing Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom, but that's partnered up with Parenthood, so I
I
can't.
never understood on Nintendo. I had Legend of Zelda, and I could never figure out what it was I was supposed to be doing.
I
don't
mean,
know,
there's
like, it
usually waypoints or checkpoints that you're trying to find, and then you're solving different
I
castles or rooms. I don't know.
When Nintendo came out, the original Nintendo,
Mhm.
I mean, everybody had, the games that you guys obviously hear about all the time. I mean, Tecmo Bowl and Mike Tyson's Punch-Out was by far the best. RBI Baseball was awesome. But Super Mario Brothers, I think maybe even when you got the Nintendo, Super Mario Brothers might have been the game that originally came with it.
Yep.
But my mom got addicted to it. And like I'd come home from school ready to play RBI Baseball, and my mom would be sitting there waving me off because she was playing Super Mario Brothers.
Got the hot hand, Jake.
She played
Get outta
all
here.
the time. My mom literally played all the time Super Mario Brothers. All right, we have the tickets to give away. Eddie, do we have callers lined up? What number are we going
Yes.
with here?
Not Jake. Jimmy, pick a number.
2.
Eddie?
Robert.
Robert, how are you?
I'm great. How are you guys doing?
We're good. Robert, can we play a little Get to Know Your Listener? We've had success with this and
Kids
research.
love it, let me
Kids
tell
do
you.
love this when we do this. Can we play a little Get to Know Your Listener with you, Robert?
I've listened to you for years, and I've heard this before. So, yeah, of course.
Okay. Now, when you hear it, Robert, do you enjoy Get to Know Your Listener?
Sometimes.
Okay, so you're a kid. Okay. All right, Robert, if you don't mind me asking, how old a fella are you?
Just a little younger than you.
Okay, this is 29-year-old Robert. Okay,
There we go.
Robert, what school did you graduated from? What high school?
I am from Canada, but my boys they went to North Central. So now I have a freshman at IU, and I have a sophomore at North Central.
So
And they
you
did-
now
they
hold
did-
on. Now
They did your route. They went the Ellisonville, Eastwood, North Central route.
okay. Now, Robert, you said you grew up in Canada. How did you end up in the United States? Or obviously aside from the
No.
tunnel. What's that?
The The girl.
Okay. And you're still with said girl?
Go there.
Okay. What about ketchup potato chips? Do you like ketchup potato chips?
Love that question. Every good Canadian loves a ketchup potato chip.
Yes. All right. Now, what about Roots? How much of your wardrobe is from Roots Canada?
Roots is Tim Hortons, Roots, ketchup potato chips. Let's go.
All right. Now, do you know how to spell Canada, Robert? Do you know how to spell Canada by chance?
Oh, I know you're going to end something with A. I know that.
It's
you go for it. Just tell me.
Canada? Okay.
There it is.
Lastly,
Yeah.
Robert, most important question. Your favorite hockey club is what? What is?
Come on.
Can I guess?
Me, please.
Can I
Tonight
guess
at
here?
7.
I'm going to say that you are a fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Jake, I haven't missed a game in a dozen years. So I watch every single game.
Of the
We
Leafs?
play at 7:30.
All right. Well, listen, the Leafs are going to struggle this year anytime they go up against my Buffalo Sabres because I told you I've adopted the Calgary Flames are my Canadian team, but my American team, the Buffalo Sabres. My buddies and I are totally on board. Robert, I appreciate you participating and get to know your
You're
listener.
not wrong about Buffalo. We struggle against Buffalo.
I know. No, I know. Trust me.
I would tell you, put all your money on Maple Leafs winning it this year. We're going to do it.
Okay, unless they play the Sabres, right?
We haven't won it since 1967, but it's going to be this year.
Robert, trust me, I'm just as knowledgeable on my Buffalo Sabres now that I've been a fan for almost 2 weeks. Stay on the line. We will get your information. Last night, as part of the Buffalo Sabres, to rehash, myself and two of my buddies from high school decided that we needed to pick an NHL team to keep us in touch with one another, to text about and do everything else. And then we're like, and then we'll go for a weekend and go to an away game next season for our team. So we bought hats, bought T-shirts, whatever else. And my buddy Byron sends a text last night. He's like, all right, let's go. I'm fired up. Thursday, season begins for the Sabres. And then my buddy Scott, who lives in Chicago, responds on our Go Sabres group text and is like, Byron, they've already played 2 games. They're 0-2. He's like, wait, what? They're 0-2. And I'm like, I'm going to need you to be a little bit better here, Byron, in terms of keeping up with what's going on. If we're going to be diehards and we're all in on the Sabres, and we're in on the ground floor, and I don't know him at all, but I told Mike Vanderjagt, because he's a big fan of the Leafs, I told Mike Vanderjagt, I'm like, when we go to Buffalo, since you are living in upstate New York, like, you need to come meet us for the Sabres game. And he's like, all right, I'll do it. So we kind of have Vanderjagt in our thing, even though he's a Maple Leafs fan. And I don't know Mike Vanderjagt at all. I just roped him into this whole thing because all Canadians love hockey, like Robert just said, right?
So Vanderjagt is or is not going to go with you to a game?
Vanderjagt said, I'll go to the game. But he said, but just so you know, the Sabres do suck. And I'm like, no, I'm aware. That's why we're not bandwagon folks, Jimmy.
Sure.
Like, you look at me, this is the thing people need to know about me. And I'm not afraid to admit it, okay? I am a low-maintenance, laid-back, simple kind of dude.
Yeah.
I'm road tripping. I'm a Holiday Inn Express guy, right?
Sure.
We go into somewhere to get snacks on the road, ketchup, potato chips, perfectly cool. You want to get something to eat? I'll stop in one of the sandwich shops, get a sandwich on the road. I don't need I'm not a fancy guy.
Sure.
Likewise, when it comes to picking a team, see, I'm not like yourself.
Sure. I like that you're doing this now.
I'm not like yourself. I didn't say, look, I need a team. Oh, I'll just be a Chiefs fan. I didn't say, I need a team. I'm going to be a Yankees fan.
Sure.
You're
grossly misrepresenting me, something that we've gone down this path multiple times.
I'm not. Okay, for example, a guy that you guys know that worked with J&V for a long time, like Tony Donahue, during the NCAA tournament when he's like, let's go Kansas, North Carolina, Kentucky, Arizona, Indiana, Illinois, Purdue. Let's go. No, that's not me.
Sure, correct. You pick a team and you stick with that team.
That's right. And so I'm all in on the Sabres because we're starting ground floor.
Correct.
Nobody's going to – and then I'm telling you right now, when the Buffalo Sabres become the Cinderella of this year's NHL season, and it's hard to skate on ice, especially with glass slippers on,
yeah.
But when the Buffalo Sabres are doing exactly that, then you can go back and play this tape and say, Query's no bandwagon fan.
Sure. He
was there, ground floor. Everybody thinks they're going to be terrible. I'm all in. I I've got to work on getting to know the roster a little bit. Because if you were to ask me some players for the Sabres, I'll tell you that I have a hat, and the hat is cool. But I'm going to get to know the roster a little bit. And then I'll be able to, even though I will be one of 18 people in Marion County that truly care about the NHL, I'll be able to in an educated sense, talk about it.
And then Olivia and I are 2 of those other 18, so you have 3 of the 18 right here.
And you're the fan of the Seattle Kraken, right?
Yes, sir.
And I think we know why, right?
And yeah, they lost yesterday, but that's not.
Did they?
Yeah,
Are we putting a wager on how many times they play the Sabres this year?
Probably twice at least. I don't know.
You know they don't. When the Sabres play Seattle, they don't even need the Zamboni. You know why?
Why?
Because they got the broom anyway, just to sweep that ice, baby. Because I'm telling you right now, they got no chance.
They were up 2-0 yesterday when I was watching, and then
soccer terms now.
I know. Anyway, they were up 2-0 when I was watching yesterday. I had to leave to come back here for the Pacers game, and not even 5 minutes later, they were down 3-2.
Well, they were only a goal away from level.
I will shoulder the blame for the L yesterday.
I'm guessing Dave Revsine is a fan of the Blackhawks, but we'll find out. He's with the Big Ten Network, and there are a lot of big games of Big Ten this week of note in college football, so he is going to join us on the other side. Dave Revsine is, of course, the face, the voice of the Big Ten Network, joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line, and the big one in college football this week is a Big Ten matchup of Ohio State and Oregon. We'll get to that in just a second and talk Indiana as well. Dave, before we do so, we were just talking NHL. You're based in Chicago. I think you grew up in the Chicagoland area. Are you a Blackhawks fan?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm a diehard. I was definitely hugely on the bandwagon when they were winning Stanley Cups.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it was so much fun. It was just fun. Like, I had friends who were season ticket holders. My season kind of would end just as the playoffs were starting up. I got invited to a ton of Stanley Cup games. I mean, the scene at the United Center was amazing. So I was very into it and really enjoyed it. But when they're not good, I just move on with my life. So
You're not losing.
So,
well,
no.
you're
So
a
am I
White Sox fan, right?
I am a White Sox fan. And I do lose a little bit of sleep over that. But
Dave, Shannon and I drove up this year for our annual White Sox afternoon game, and they won. Okay, they won on an immaculate inning to win the game, and then lost 22 straight. So for like 6 weeks, I was able to say I was at their last victory. It was unbelievable, you know. But anyway, they became so bad they were interesting. But speaking of interesting, let's get to this, and I'll give you actually recipient's choice. We can begin with Ohio State, Oregon, or we can begin talking about what Curt Cignetti has done with Indiana. Your choice.
let's start with Indiana. What an amazing story. I feel like that's the place to start. We're in Indy. Why not go with the hometown team?
Okay, and much appreciated. So let's get to this, Dave, and that is I do think that if you were to tell the story in totality, you probably should at least mention that Indiana has yet to really go into the meat of their schedule. But I don't know that that really even matters just because of the way that they offensively have been able to take leads and then just hold on to it and pull away from people and just have a swagger about themselves. Did you see when you guys were doing your tour before the season began, at what point did you have indication that, in fact, things might be different in Bloomington?
I wouldn't say it was when we were there on the tour. I didn't think they had a particularly good day. Curtis Rourke had a bad day when we were there, and they acknowledged as much afterward when we were talking with the staff. He threw a couple interceptions. He just honestly didn't look great. Truthfully, Taven Jackson had a better day than Curtis Rourke when we were there, and it wasn't really that close. So I guess it shows you how much our one day of practice actually indicates, although it's not to say Taven Jackson isn't a good quarterback, but we did not see from Curtis Rourke what we've seen all year. I mean, I think it was evident that there was a lot of enthusiasm surrounding the program and that he made a lot of sense as a coaching hire just because he had been a head coach and had a lot of success. But I would be completely lying if I said that we left there with any indication that this was going to happen. I would have never guessed that this would happen. I'm as surprised as anyone. I thought that the schedule gave them the potential to get off to a nice start. Like if you would have told me that they were going to start 4-0 or even 6-0, like I'm not sure I would have been totally astonished because to your point, it hasn't been the greatest schedule, but it's the way in which they've done it. I mean, they've just annihilated people. As you said, Jake, the offense is really, really good. So to me, again, the record is one thing, and the record's amazing when you're Indiana and you haven't done this since the 1960s. So I'm not minimizing that. But I guess what I'm saying is I don't think that it's a product of the schedule. I think it's a product of them being really good.
When you look, Dave, and you would have the access to it, maybe even when you guys are off air, right? Just kind of looking over things. When you look at what Indiana's done in Curt Cignetti, and when you talk to your colleagues, whether it be Coach DiNardo or guys that have played in the Big Ten, you're talking about somebody who would have intimate knowledge of the challenges that Indiana football has had over the years. At no discredit to those that came before him, what do you think it is that Curt Cignetti has been able to do to just kind of captivate even a belief amongst those in Bloomington that Indiana football has arrived?
he just has this swagger about him. I mean, you guys have observed him. Like, it's just different. He just has this belief. It started literally the day after he was hired. We were in Indy for the Big Ten championship game, and he came and visited with us on the set, and he said, we're going to be back here next year. And I kind of said to him, like, do you want to go on record with that? And he said, I just did. Right? Like, hey, man, I just said it. There's just something about him. And it doesn't hurt that we're in an era now where players can just transfer, right? So whereas other coaches have had to kind of figure out a way, how am I going to build this? He was able to take a dozen players from a really successful program in JMU and bring them with him to Bloomington. So that was a big part of it. Just in general, I think it's easier to turn a program around now than it was even 3 or 4 years ago. But we're still talking about Indiana football, and we're talking about the Power Conference program that has lost more games than any other in the history of college football. So the notion that, well, it's easier to do now, yeah, but it's easier for everyone. I mean, everyone who hires a new coach. It's easier for Michigan State. It was easier for Purdue a year ago. It's easier for Nebraska. It's easier for all of these programs, yet he's the one who's doing it. So, I mean, hats off. Like, I'm blown away by how well he's done. And again, kind of the way that he carries himself and the way he's been able to instill that belief in his players.
Dave Revsine of the Big Ten Network joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Dave, you bring up the comments in December at media day for the Big Ten championship, and that was really an introduction for a lot of IU fans for, oh, hey, here's the new head coach. Let's see what he has to say. And yeah, he was mocked. I mocked him a little bit for it at the time of exactly what you mentioned. We're going to be back here next year. Now it's no longer an insane thought to have. So a two-part question, because I know this is on a lot of the minds of IU fans. A, can they afford to just have one loss on the season, it be Michigan or Ohio State, take your pick, probably Ohio State, and get to the Big Ten title game? And then B, if we're entertaining that much, they could be in a Big Ten championship game a year after those comments. What's to stop them from getting into the college football playoff?
Could it happen? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing, again, that he really benefits from is the schedule's not that hard.
Right. We've emphasized that a lot, by the way, is that it is very helpful to their prospects.
No doubt, Jimmy. So even having to play both Michigan and Ohio State, like, let's just be honest. I mean, Michigan is nowhere near the Michigan of last year. So I do think they have a lot going for them. Could you lose just the one game to Ohio State and still make it? I mean, I guess it's going to depend on tiebreakers. Who wins Ohio State, Oregon? Does that team that wins that game, do they lose a game somewhere along the way? Does the loser of that game lose another one? I mean, I guess it's hard to prognosticate. But, yes, it's certainly eminently possible that if you lose just to Ohio State, that you could make the Big Ten championship game.
Do they need to play in that game, Dave, to make the playoff? Do they need – okay.
No, no. I think at least 3 Big Ten teams are going to make it. So the math would tell us that there's one team, at a minimum, I think, that will not play in that game that will make the college football playoff. So, no, I don't think you have to be in it at all to make the playoff. And I think Indiana, I mean, you look at some of these mathematical models, and Indiana is right there in the conversation as to having one of the, mathematically one of the better chances of making it. So I don't think it's unreasonable at all. And yeah, I mean, it's an amazing, amazing story. Like, and you talk about like him saying we're going to be here next year. Again, why shouldn't you say, people probably did mock him. I mean, it was before social media, but like, I don't know if you guys remember this far back, but like when Gary Barnett got hired at Northwestern and they had like 21 losing seasons in a row at that point, it ended up being, I think, 24. He got in front of a basketball crowd and said, we're going to take the purple to Pasadena.
I remember that, yep.
Yeah, like what a ludicrous proposition that was. And then 4 years later, he did it. So I don't, again, I say whatever you want to say. Like I'm all for it. I'm all for trying to instill belief in people. It's not how I would roll just because that's not who I am. But it is who Kurt Cignetti is, and I think it sent a really clear message that we're going to take a back seat to no one. That's just not the way that he operates, and then he's gone out and backed it up.
Dave, to me, the thing that is equally stunning, I'll be honest with you, and maybe I was just asleep at the wheel, wouldn't be the first time, but I didn't know that Indiana was going to be able to do this, and I also didn't know that Purdue was going to appear to be this far off base. And now you have, in Purdue's case, not only are they getting absolutely blown off the field, but they're losing recruits, they're losing transfers. Is there – I hate saying this. I'm not the guy that is calling for someone's job in year number 2, but it just feels like Purdue, of any team in the league, is the one that has the bleakest immediate and then, in turn, long-term future. What can be done in West Lafayette?
I don't know the answer to that, Jake. I will say this. If we go back to what we were talking about with Indiana, you can do a hard reset. I mean, you can say, hey, he's already said, I got the offensive coordinator wrong, and he hired, and fired Graham Harrell and hired Jason Simmons here in the interim. Jason Simmons, I'd be astonished if he ends up as the full-time OC. But you are able to kind of turn things around quickly. But, yeah, I mean, there's just not a lot of evidence right now to suggest that that's going to happen in West Lafayette. I'm really surprised by this. We left there, and I thought they were okay. They held a ton of veterans out. We were there on a day where they were doing a scrimmage. They held a ton of guys out, so it was hard to tell. But I still thought there was talent there, and I still think there's some talent there. But I think, like, one of the hard things – kind of the corollary to how you can turn things around really quickly is I do think that in a lot of ways you're dealing with guys, especially if they're transfers, who may not be as invested as someone who's spent 3 years at a place and who's kind of toiled and their blood and their sweat and their tears and, man, like, this is my mission, get Purdue football back. And, again, I'm not suggesting the guys are quitting. I'm not suggesting they don't care. I'm just saying, like, if your level of investment is different, if things start to go south, it's a harder job as a coach to say, no, hey, we're all in this together. And I think that's the task in front of Ryan Walters here. And that part of it isn't easy. And you have to squint really, really hard to see evidence of it right now. I mean, again, there have been some, like the first half against Nebraska, they certainly played representative football, at least defensively. I mean, the offense is kind of a mess. But overall here, particularly the Wisconsin game and the Notre Dame game, I mean, it's hard to look at that and see any reason for hope. And so, yeah, then for Ryan, I mean, he said it. We're not a good football team. So you got to roll up your sleeves and figure out a way to make sure you have everyone on board. And I think that's the really challenging task facing him is that it has started to go south, and how do you prevent it from getting worse, particularly when a good Illinois team and then Oregon are the next two teams that you face. And then you have Northwestern, and then you have Ohio State and Penn State. Like 4 of the next 5 games are against teams that are playing really, really well.
Dave Revsine, our guest. Okay, Dave, let's get to that about Oregon. And I'm not trying to carry Big Ten water here, but it's weird, and maybe it's because we had a year of anticipation for it. But to me, when I turn on and I see Oregon or Washington, or for that matter, USC playing in the Big House, I'm like, oh yeah, they're in the Big Ten. Like the shock value of it to me is gone, and now it's just super cool, right? And it's cool that you have Oregon and Ohio State. I think Ohio State is really good. I heard you mentioning, their freshman receiver. You're like, he's really good at football. A lot of players at Ohio State are. Oregon, I'm still not. It feels like they haven't hit stride yet, hit rhythm. Am I selling Oregon short?
Well, these last few games, they've been really good. The first 2 games, they weren't good at all. I mean, they barely beat Idaho and narrowly escaped Boise State. Now, as it turns out, they gave up a ton of rushing yards to Ashton Genty. And I don't know how closely you guys have been following Boise State's running back, but
it's unbelievable.
He's
over 1,000 yards,
may
right?
win the Heisman Trophy. I mean, he's unbelievable. But let's be honest here. Quinshon Judkins is pretty good too, and Travion Henderson's pretty good. So the trouble stopping the run early on, which they have reversed. I mean, these last few games, Oregon's been really good in terms of the run defense, but it hasn't been anything near the level of what they're going to see here against Ohio State. So I think that the jury is still out a little bit on them defensively against an elite opponent like this, but they certainly solved the issues they had up front offensively. That offensive line was bad to start the year. It's been very good here. Last 3 games, I don't believe they have given up a sack. They gave up 7 in the first 2 games, which is more than they gave up all of last year. The one other issue that would be concerning to me if I were Oregon would be the red zone interceptions. Dylan Gabriel has thrown 3 of them here in the last 2 weeks, including one that was returned for a touchdown against UCLA. You can't make those kinds of mistakes, obviously, and win a game against Ohio State. So Ohio State has looked like the more complete team to this point, but I don't think there's like an obvious glaring weakness with either one of these teams. I think there have been a couple of areas that maybe you'd be concerned about with Oregon, and this Ohio State game will be a good way to gauge whether or not they've addressed them.
Dave, how would you, at nearly the halfway point, properly assess in totality the merger now of all of these, formerly Pac-12, now Big Ten schools, getting that West Coast influx, seeing people make the jokes of, longtime power Washington of the Big Ten Conference. You see those all over Twitter. To this stage, how would you rate and address how everything has gone from that standpoint of injecting new life, new programs, and all the hype that surrounded it of the Big Ten Conference with the West Coast editions?
I think it's been amazing. I mean, I think USC, Michigan is a regular season game. Oregon, Ohio State is a regular season game. I mean, all these games are, these are matchups that we would have been salivating over. There would have been once a year kind of things. And now it feels like week in and week out, we're getting these marquee battles. I mean, USC, Penn State, even to a certain extent this week, maybe some of the luster's off it because I think USC still got a little ways to go here, and maybe we got a little overly carried away by that win early in the year against LSU. But to me, I mean, as someone who, look, I view it through the lens of television, Jimmy, because that's what I do. And from the perspective of someone who's in TV, like, this is great programming. This is what people want to see. They want to see great games. They don't necessarily want to see powerhouses against lesser opponents. They want to see marquee games. And we're just going to have more marquee games. So from that point of view, I think it's great. I think it was cool to see, like, Indiana goes out to UCLA, and I mean, look at all the Hoosier fans in the Rose Bowl. Minnesota's going to be the same way this week, taking on UCLA. Minnesota hasn't played a game in the Rose Bowl since the 1960s. So, and, these far-flung alumni bases with graduates all over the country, this is an opportunity for them to see their team where they live, and I think that's really cool.
Dave, I'm going to be in West Lafayette beginning of the year when the schedule came out. I bought tickets for the Purdue-Oregon game because I want to be there when the Boilers under the lights shock the world, right? My biggest concern of the game is if the students tear down the goalpost and throw it in the Wabash, I don't want them to hit the big inflatable duck. That's my big concern here, right? Because he's going to be there, right? Doesn't he travel with him?
I assume, yeah. I mean, I have to believe you bring the big inflatable duck everywhere.
Of course.
You go. How amazing was that scene? Like, think about this. Think about this. Like, Vanderbilt was 0-60 all time against top 5 teams. Like, you would just think that somewhere along the way, right, like 1948, Tennessee rolls in at number 5, and Vandy's got a little bit better team than normal, and just somehow, some way, they get it done and pull off that upset. Just to think that it had never happened.
How about, what does it say when you have a rival coach in Lane Kiffin that's doing a press conference and stops it and goes, hang on, guys, this is like a once-in-a-lifetime thing that I'm witnessing here?
Yeah.
I mean.
No, I know.
Right there, that tells you, But
it's totally amazing to think that they had never beaten a top 5 team ever, and then you go out and beat number 1. It was a cool scene. I mean, it really, it's what we love about college football, and I think for all of the people saying, the sport's been ruined, and You're going to have all the power is going to be concentrated in these few programs. I'm not saying that college football is perfect, and I understand if there are people who, for whatever reason, don't love some of the things that it's turned into, and that's your prerogative, and you can like it or not like it and whatever. But here you have Vanderbilt knocking off Alabama. Like that, to me,
there's an unpredictability of roster now, Dave, that I actually find. Now, is that going to sustain forever? I don't know. But the fact that now you get a kid that transfers from New Mexico State or whatever it was and is a quarterback that has experience, and now Vanderbilt's pulling off an upset, and I mean, you get 4 teams in the top 11 losing on the same night in field rushes and all that. I'm telling you, that's why that kind of excitement is the reason I bought the tickets. Now, I'm not going to rush field and tear down goalposts in West Lafayette, but I'll watch it when they beat Oregon and they stun the world. I'm just telling you. That's what's going to happen.
By the way, Indiana, 1-70 all-time against top 5 teams.
I got to think. Do you know who the one is?
Yeah, I think it's Purdue in the 60s.
Okay.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens, right, if they are, in fact, still somehow unbeaten going into that game against Ohio State, what the hype surrounding that one would be.
It'll be big. It'll be big, and I know you guys will be covering it. Dave, I appreciate it. I know you got a busy schedule up there in Chicago, and that includes, of course, getting set for your big season of Blackhawk fandom. So we'll let you get to that. And by the way, when this show comes out with koozies, Dave, you're the first to get one, just so you know. I know you've been clamoring for that, and we got the people working on it.
All right. I'll give mine to Connor Bedard.
All right. Dave, we appreciate it, man.
See you guys.
All right, Dave Revsine joining us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. All right. We now know we have better idea of the Indianapolis Colts that have practiced today. Eddie, do you happen to have before you the sound effects when I mention the player? You tell me whether or not they are in or out for practice today. Are you ready?
Yes, Jake, I am ready.
We will begin with center Ryan Kelly, who has a neck injury. Okay, that's good news. How about quarterback Anthony Richardson with his oblique injury? Is he practicing? Good news again, right? Kwity Paye. Do we have any info on Kwity Paye? He's in, huh?
Yes, sir.
Kenny Moore? This is all good. Can we do a clean sweep with the ankle injury of Jonathan Taylor?
No, God! No, God, please, no! No!
No, wait a minute. That means now, because he says please no, that means that he's hoping he doesn't practice. He did not practice.
It's tough at the end there. Can I throw out one more?
Okay.
Josh Downs.
I haven't seen anything on him.
Okay, well, no, he's not.
Where's the sound effect on that, Eddie? If you haven't seen anything.
I didn't see anything about him missing, so I had no idea.
I know, but we have a sound effect for we don't know, right?
Oh, I didn't have it ready. I'm sorry.
Joel A. Erickson reporting that Josh Downs is also out of action today. Also, for what it's worth, and
I did see there was someone else.
I've yet to see a follow-up on that, but James Boyd also mentioned this, probably what Eddie's alluding to. 5 minutes ago, he tweeted at Romeoville Kid. No sign of Colts wide receiver Josh Downs or Michael Pittman Jr. at practice right now.
Then there's one more.
What's the one more?
Jonathan Taylor's replacement. He's not out there either.
Trey Sermon?
Yes.
You know, we should get somebody with boots on the ground to join us on the other side to give us some update on apparently and especially a couple of those newer names that have popped up. So you said you've done exactly that, correct, Eddie?
That would be correct, Jake.
Casey Valier from the Colts will join us on the other side and get a firsthand perspective from him on who's in, who's out in terms of the activity, in terms, how much they're doing today in practice. That conversation next. Joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, he is the in-game studio host, radio. What was the other part of the title there, Jimmy?
Coordinator, radio
coordinator. For some reason, I was thinking radio controller.
All-around good dude also should be
a radio controller. He's a coordinator, right?
He is indeed.
All the radios that are over on West 56th Street, Casey Vallier is the one that coordinates all of them. Do you have them all coordinated to this radio station, Casey, just out of curiosity?
They are. I was actually dialing up the last one when I was on.
Well, what was it on?
So
if you were dialing it up, I'd like to know what it was previously on.
Well, I can't give you that information. Top secret over here.
Fair enough. All right. Well, we appreciate your time today. We were just talking about those that are in and out in terms of the injury report, and this is the first chance to kind of get a better idea at that. Let's begin with Anthony Richardson. You anticipate that the workload for him may be what, and just how it will kind of ramp up as we get set for Sunday and trying to figure out whether he goes or Joe Flacco goes?
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see what the report that comes out of it a little bit later on says. I'm assuming that they will kind of ease him into practicing this week. He's been out there doing all the individual stuff today, so I would assume that it'll be a limited. There may be a chance that it's a full, but I would assume by Friday that workload will continue to increase, because ultimately what he mentioned in the locker room today, that he and the training staff and coaching staff was surprised he was so close on Sunday when he did all of his pregame stuff. They were shocked at how much he was able to do. So I'm assuming that gives them a lot of clarity that he can continue to ramp up his workload as the week goes on this week.
When you, Casey, to give listeners an idea here, and maybe it's different week to week, but if you could, give us indication in terms of what a Wednesday practice typically looks like and which day of the week the practices are the most rigorous.
Yeah, I would say the Thursday practice is like the big one, because typically Wednesday you've got the guys that, whether they were out the previous week or they got hurt in that previous week, Wednesday is kind of that first way to get like the initial look. So and Wednesday is typically like a rest day as well. So you'll have some veterans that'll have a day off. Like Braden Smith's not practicing today. That's kind of been the MO they've gone with the last couple of weeks, where he's dealing with that knee injury. And typically Thursday is the day that gives you a real good idea on how close guys are. So today we didn't see Jonathan Taylor, kind of expected. A lot of people are hoping that maybe he will get at least a limited participation tomorrow, and that might give them a good idea on whether or not he can go on Sunday.
Casey, what do you make of and I know these are late additions, so respond accordingly, but what do you make of the lack of appearances, at least to this point, through practice of Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs? I know Downs is the one that had the toe injury over the weekend, and how is that monitored throughout the rest of the week in terms of their availability for Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, that one we'll definitely continue to see. A lot of times I don't put too much stock in those guys on Wednesday, because both of them are pretty much, I mean, you can kind of label them as just gamers. Like, they're the kind of guys, kind of like Braden Smith, who they don't necessarily need a full week of practice. Now, Josh, you got a little bit of different, vibe, just because he did miss some time with that ankle. So when all of that, it kind of adds up as far as that injuries go. But ultimately, it looked like both of them were, they talked in the locker room today, both in good spirits. So I'm assuming that today is just kind of a precautionary rest. Now, we'll get a really good idea tomorrow. If they aren't able to go tomorrow, then you kind of start raising those questions on their availability for Sunday. But right now, as it looks, I kind of view this as kind of just that, hey, we had offensively they put up 34 points on Sunday. Give them a little bit of an extra day to rest before they really kick it into gear on Thursday.
Casey, you mentioned the point total they put together. Casey Vallier, our guest, he joined us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line, in-studio host for the Colts, as well as radio coordinator down there as well. Brought to you by Showing Materials, concrete and aggregate experts.
That's
Casey,
well
it is.
done,
There's
Jimmy.
a lot
Well
there,
done.
a lot there to cover. And hey, I'd like to say I did it smoothly. That's the first time for me right there. You mentioned the point total they had against Jacksonville. That wasn't the issue, right? They put up 34 points. I've said this number of times this week. That should win you most games. Defensively has been the issue. Eddie highlighted this earlier in the week. Feels like career days left and right for running backs, quarterbacks galore. I worry about that happening if Will Levis goes on Sunday with how lackluster this defense has been. Where is reason for optimism for them to turn a tide in two games? It feels like they have to have back-to-back in Tennessee and Miami.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, I actually was looking at the schedule, kind of moving forward, and I looked at it initially with 4 of 5 on the road, 3 of them being divisional opponents. That's a really tough stretch. But then if you even go further and you go, Buffalo, you got the Vikings, you got the Jets. I mean, it's a gauntlet. I mean, it's a really, really tough stretch until your bye week. So absolutely, it's hard to just chalk it up that, okay, it's Will Levis and, he has struggled. The Titans offense hasn't done much. It's hard to just chalk it up as this defense is a good get-back game against the Titans this Sunday because you just haven't seen it. So it is hard to just kind of say that. But ultimately, I'll go back to what I probably have preached this a handful of times. There's a lot of really good players on this Colts defense that have proven that they can play at a high level. Your guys like E.J. Speed, Zaire Franklin, Kenny Moore's back at practice today. Julian Blackmon has played really good football. You know what Grover Stewart can do, all these guys. So there's a handful of pieces that have all put together really good football on tape. You're just hoping that they can kind of get the whole entire collective to buy in and play the defense that they preach all week on Sundays. That's ultimately, they talked about it. It comes back to fundamentals. They were missing tackles on Sunday, and it's stuff that you just don't typically see, and that's what led to, ultimately where you're looking at another loss in Jacksonville against a team that came into it as kind of where the Titans are offensively, a team that had been struggling.
Casey, it's one thing to find a veteran quarterback that can come in when his number's called and play well. It's another thing to find one that is willing to do that and understand that he goes right back when the young up-and-coming quarterback is healthy again. Can you give indication of when you saw or when the organization might have seen out of Joe Flacco what we presume to be that attitude that is the one you want, which is that he is totally under the understanding that there is not going to be a quarterback controversy. Not every quarterback would be wired that way. What leads us to believe that Joe Flacco is, in fact, the guy that understands it's Anthony Richardson's team?
No, it's a great question. It's one of those things that ultimately we heard him talk about it last week, how it's really, really challenging because you go in with this mindset of being a backup quarterback and you envision it one way, and then you actually live it. And for him, this is – he had some times where he had been benched in the past. I think it was, in Denver he had an injury where he had to become the backup later in the year. I think in New York he had that issue. But ultimately, he's been a starting quarterback throughout his entire career. So being a backup, it's a different mindset. And he mentioned how you think about it one way, but then you actually have to go through the motions, and it is difficult. But I think what thing with Joe Flacco that really resonated with me when talking to him this offseason is ultimately last year he was sitting on the couch watching football with his family at one point of the year because nobody was calling, and that's kind of where he was. So he understands where he is kind of at this level in his career. But then again, he came here to compete. He came here to play. And when he goes out and plays, you saw what he did on Sunday. It's wild. The Colts are the first team in 50 years to have a quarterback who's leading the league in passer rating. And then Anthony Richardson right now, he's when it comes to quarterbacks that qualify, he's got the least passer rating. So ultimately, when Joe's out there, he's productive. So it is something that is very it takes I don't know what the word is, like savvy vet, if you will, to be able to have that mentality to just in some ways go through the motions during the week, but then, when you're thrust in there to go out there and perform. But, we saw it on Sunday. He's definitely a guy that can win some football games.
Hey, as the radio coordinator over there, when you got all the radios and you're coordinating them all, what is it that gives you indication that Gorman's been screwing around with one of them? What's it playing? What kind of music is it playing?
Well, ultimately what it is he had his stint with the Black Crows, so ultimately we just hear all kinds of, whether it's,
I'm down with that, man. I like the Black Crows.
Yeah, he's got all of his Black Crows going, or, he even goes back. He's a big Pearl Jam fan. I don't know if you've heard his Eddie Vedder. So we got, it's constantly, Black Crows and Pearl Jam and that era of music. So I don't complain about it, but it does make my job a little more difficult.
That's right. Listen, these are coordinated all to be on the fan. What are you doing, Gorman? Come on, right? Hey, Casey, one other thing for you, just in terms of the practice today and those that are out there. And you might have mentioned this earlier. We talked about Jonathan Taylor. I think that's kind of to be expected. I don't know where things stand in terms of how much time he would need to be able to go on Sunday. But Eddie had mentioned earlier Trey Sermon also, and if you covered this already, I apologize. Trey Sermon also is not out there today, correct?
Correct.
Is that a scheduled rest day, or is there something we need to keep an eye on here?
I mean, it's definitely something to keep an eye on because this is not a stab at Trey Sermon, but I don't know if he's probably on that list of scheduled rest
Right.
days because Jonathan Taylor would be that guy. And especially if he's not out there practicing, you want all these guys to get as many reps as possible. So that is something to keep an eye on. And it may be something that Trey Sermon, he picked up something on Sunday, he got more run than he's used to, picked up something, and maybe he just needed one extra day to kind of get him ready to roll. But with Jonathan Taylor, that's a great one because I don't think he needs to practice. He's, you know what you have in Taylor, so it's one of those things you try to get him as ready to go throughout the week so that he can give you a go on Sunday. Now, I do know, talking to some people here, I mean, he has been here essentially since this high ankle sprain was diagnosed. He's been in the building very, very early, working really, really hard in the weight room and in the training room. So Jonathan Taylor's doing everything he needs to do to get back on the field. Now, we'll see if that bodes well for him playing on Sunday, but definitely keep an eye out for Trey Sermon for tomorrow. When the injury report comes out today to kind of see where he is tomorrow, we'll give you a better indication as far as that running back room goes for sure.
All right, Casey, we appreciate it. We'll let you get back to coordinating, all right?
All right, thanks. I'll turn them back to the Crows. And anything else? Anything else you guys request? Jimmy, anything?
Oasis, baby.
Okay, all right, we can do that. Sounds good.
Get one of them on Oasis for me. All right, Casey Valia joining us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line. Jimmy has his plays of the day. He's been feverishly looking over everything, and we will get into that just a couple minutes from now.
Today, brought to you by the fine folks at Greenfield Signs and Lighting. Greenfield Signs, a professional, comprehensive sign company with 2 locations in central Indiana. They'll take your signage ideas and take hold of the project from design all the way to delivery. Family-owned and managed business for more than 4 generations. You don't often get a second chance to make a first impression. Make the most out of your first opportunity with Greenfield Signs and Lighting. For more information, go to greenfieldsigns.com. Today's plays of the day all focused on Major League Baseball. The last time this year that there will be more than 2 baseball games going on throughout the day, I should say. We'll start first with first pitch 3:08 as the Cleveland Guardians take on the Detroit Tigers. Give me the Tigers, 20 on the money line, outright over Cleveland.
That game's in Detroit, is that right?
It is in Detroit,
Okay.
indeed. A little later this evening, Mets and Phillies, 5:08 first pitch. I'll take the New York Mets, 20 on the money line, over the Philadelphia
That
Phillies.
game's where?
That game
New York
is in New York, indeed. At Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City, Missouri, I'll take the Kansas City Royals, 20 on the money line over the New York Yankees. Last one for you, I'll take the Padres, 20 on the money line over the Los Angeles Dodgers. Eddie, any plays from you?
I do have some plays, Jimmy.
Nice.
I do have a couple.
All right.
Went 1-1 yesterday. I'm glad you finally got the best of me. Okay, do I think the New York Yankees...
I root for you to do well, by the way. I don't look at it as a besting. I hope you do well in your betting endeavors, Eddie. Try to build people up.
do I think the Yankees can beat the Royals?
Yes, they can.
Nice. That's what you've been talking that all day for.
Yes, but I'm not taking them today. I'm actually taking them under 4.5 runs. The New York Yankees, that is. I like Seth Lugo for Kansas City. He's been really good gym for them this year in terms of free agency and finding him. I'm going to ride this again until it does not hit. I am taking the Dodgers and the Padres over 8.
I like that a lot, Eddie.
Bullpen game, as Jimmy noted earlier in the show, for the LA Dodgers, and then Dylan Cease on the mound. He typically struggles in the first couple of innings, so I think it'll be important for the Dodgers to get ahead. And with the Phillies, I think they're dead in the water. I will be taking the New York Mets. I'll take them as well on the money line, and I'll take the game over 7.5. If it's not today, then it's never for Philly. They haven't scored other than the Kyle Schwarber home run in game number 1 in the first 5 innings. If they can do that today against Jose Quintana, that means it'll go over 7.5, so I will take that as well.
Those are your plays of the day.
Now, here's a question for you guys from a hip standpoint. You know, it's your job to every once in a while make sure that I kind of radiate a natural coolness, right? Wouldn't you both agree to that? Like when I just walk down the street, people go, that guy's cool.
Yeah, a swagger about you, if you will. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Eddie, would you agree?
No.
Well, it'd be fun to have Corbin in here tomorrow. So, no. So, having said that, I am reliant on you guys from time to time to tell me whether or not something is, cool or old guy yelling at clouds.
That's
okay?
exactly why you're not cool, because you have to rely on us to make you cool.
That's right.
True.
I'm very comfortable in
Yes,
myself
I've already
with my
cheese
old
in,
age.
Jake. It's in right now.
So, I have a Padres hat, okay?
All right.
That I got. I was a huge Tony Gwynn fan.
Rightfully understand that fandom right there.
In all areas, right? I mean, as a player, as a dude, as a central Indiana resident, I mean, all of it. I loved Tony Gwynn. And when the Padres went to the World Series, and I always forget, I always want to say it's 96, but I think it was 98 when they went to the World Series.
98, yep.
During that World Series run, I had met Tony Gwynn just prior to that. And so I went and bought a fitted Padres hat, and I still have it. But it's a Padres hat from 26 years ago, and the Padres are one of those franchises that changes color scheme every 26 days.
So is it the brown and yellow, I think, whatever that color scheme was?
See, they've had brown and orange,
This
right?
one.
Correct. It's that one.
Yeah,
So
so
they
it's
had
like a navy black hat with a white S and an orange D.
Oh,
Correct.
that one.
So I think most people would think of I guess it depends on how old you are. Some people would think of the Padres colors as being brown and orange. That's what they wore basically in '84 when they went to the World Series. Now it's brown and kind of mustardy, which is also what they had with Ozzie Smith and Dave Winfield before they went to the '84 series. But this one is, in fact, what Jimmy just said. It's navy blue hat with a white and orange S and D locked together. Now, I still have the hat. If I want to be a bandwagon Padres fan, can I wear that hat, or is that totally lame because it's no longer?
No, it's throwback, it's vintage. I think you can still wear it. By the way, Eddie, they're out of size 15s, so I can try to find one for you. But I'm just
It's
looking
okay,
at
Jimmy.
newer.
I don't need a size 15. We've already established
Okay,
that.
my fault. Sorry. Anyway, no, it's vintage. You can wear it. It's throwbacky. I like it.
So
I get nightmares when I see that logo of Andre Ethier and who's the first baseman? Oh, I just had it in my mind. Gosh darn it. He played for the Dodgers, too.
They label it as Snow White, by the
For the
way, the type
Padres?
of color in the hat.
The what?
They label that white color as Snow White on New Era. That
Wait,
specific
Snow
type.
White, like with the what are they like with the seven dwarfs?
That's what I'm telling
or
you.
Snow White,
that's
snow, the color of snow. It's white to the color of snow.
Interesting point. I would assume that
Adrian Gonzalez.
there's a space in the middle. They're both capitalized. I think you're going Snow White like Seven Dwarfsy.
Can you name the seven dwarfs?
No, not all of them. No, I can't.
You'll be able to name six, I'll bet you, and you can't name the seventh. Go ahead. Boom. Go. Try.
Doc,
Okay.
Sleepy,
Okay.
Dopey.
Okay.
That might be as far as I can go.
Okay. Doc, you said.
Yes.
Dopey, you
Yes.
said.
Sleepy.
Sleepy. There's a Sneezy, right?
Yes.
Who else we got, Eddie? You looking up the seven dwarfs? Okay. Doc, Dopey, Sleepy, Sneezy.
Someone's getting a phone call.
Not me.
Jake, are you getting a phone call?
No, I'm not.
Oh.
I think it's you.
It's Kevin Bowen.
Was not me.
Okay. Who are the other ones? Are you looking at it right now?
Yeah. Are you guys done guessing?
Okay, wait a minute.
I gave my 4. That's all I can do.
Happy? And they're happy?
Yes. So you've got Doc, you got Grumpy, you've got Happy, you got Dopey, you got
Okay.
Sleepy, and did you say Sneezy?
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
through
You did get
season.
Sneezy. There's one more.
Is it a good or bad trait?
Good.
I don't know. Hit me.
Bashful.
Mm.
You think that's good?
I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's good. I mean, I think it's more good
Were
than
you
bad.
ever bashful? Give me an example of when you're bashful, Eddie.
Probably in a public setting.
Yeah, that's
When he's
exactly how I
talking
am.
when he's talking about his watermelon gummies.
I am, and I think people probably are surprised by this. When I have to do public speaking, I'm very bashful. Like I'm like, eesh. It's my number one public fear of like emceeing events and things like that. I do them, but the whole time I'm like terrified, absolutely terrified of it. What do we got in the big program tomorrow? Obviously, a big storyline is going to be a couple of those Colts that we were just talking about that we did not anticipate seeing on the injury report, and they are there. Josh Downs, Jonathan Taylor still not practicing. Trey Sermon is interesting, especially if Jonathan Taylor can't go. How much does Richardson go through today? Some interesting stuff to keep in mind and look towards for tomorrow, just in terms of, again, I go back to what we said at the beginning of the show. It does kind of feel like if there's a week where you can kind of hold back a little bit, I know it sounds absurd because it's the National Football League and those guys get paid too, but Tennessee just feels like they are equally trying to find any footing at all.
Nice job, Coach Query.
That was good coach.
Like that?
Yeah. It's so funny to me because Casey Value, who we just did on podcast, will be up on the podcast center on 1075thefan.com. But he highlighted the fact that for the Colts, this could be a get-right game against Tennessee. I said that about Will Levis and the Titans against its Colts defense. Even though you might, given truth serum, say the Colts are the better football team, you could make the argument both these teams, both these coaching staffs, and both these fan bases look at the weaknesses of the respective teams and say, this is a get-right game for us.
Yeah.
The other thing, Jake, for me, I'm curious with Anthony Richardson, if there's no Jonathan Taylor this week, how they use complementary pieces like Sermon and Goodson as they did for Flacco this past week, how that whole dichotomy winds up looking.
Yeah. I mean, again, we talked about if Taylor's not able to go and Sermon does go, we'll see. But they do use a little bit more out of the backfield with those guys. By the way, taking a look at the X Twitter, this from Kathy. Just got my car washed at the Norris Steak and Shake while listening to Aquarium Company. That's the former site of the Steak and Shake where I was banned for life. So the irony there to me, I can't tell you how proud that makes me to know that they got the Steak and Shake where I was banned for life.
Yeah.
It's gone.
You outlived it.
Now I outlived it. That's right. It's now a car wash. And again, a reminder, that car wash, Kathy, if you are part of a monthly car wash program
yes,
there,
exactly.
go to Jiffy Lube, let them know that you're part of the monthly car wash program, and you're going to go ahead and get right there a discount and a free tire rotation at Jiffy Lube because they say, you know what, Kathy, you care that much about the outside of your car, we're going to take care of the inside of your car, the underneath of the car, under the hood. I love it, right?
Yeah.
But it makes me so happy to know, I feel vindicated that after my permanent lifetime ban from the Steak and Shake in Nora, falsely accused, by the way, by the manager there, that, and I listen, I love Steak and Shake. Love it,
Mhm.
okay? But then when that Steak and Shake closed and it's now a car wash, if you would have told me at that time that someday I would be on the radio in Indianapolis, I would have been thrilled by that. And then if you would have said, well, somebody's going to be right here at this Steak and Shake listening to you on the radio, I would have said, see, that makes me even double thrilled, because if I can't be here, then at least my voice can be. The level of I just feel tremendous.
I'm just happy you beat the allegations from Steak and Shake. I think that's massive. Good for you.
We were falsely accused. I'm telling you, we were taking up for the waiter, and he got in a fight with the manager, and the manager got mad at us, and then we were told we were permanently banned, and we actually believed it. We actually thought there were like photos of us and that kind of thing. Okay, J&V's up next. J&V is on remote, or he is here in the building?
In the building.
J&V is here in the building, and will carry you home. Baseball tonight. We'll talk about that tomorrow, but more importantly, we will get you caught up again on what's happening on West 56th Street and the latest in terms of the health status of those players for the Colts. We will do that beginning at noon tomorrow, and J&V will take you home next until 6 p.m., and I thank you for listening to Query & Company here on 93.5 and 107.5.